burning questions that have to be answered immediately on the spot, and I hope there aren't any because I want everybody to have a chance to get through the agenda and their remarks uninterrupted. But if you have a burning question that can't wait, raise your hand. Otherwise, we're leaving 15 minutes at the end for questions from the board. And just so that everybody knows, this is a workshop. We are not taking public comment at this meeting. However, we will roll at 6 o'clock right into the planning board meeting where Verizon is first on the agenda. So we'll be able to continue our discussion then. So without further ado, Mike, I'd like you to take the floor and go over the tech memo, which you submitted a couple of meetings ago, but we've never had the opportunity to go through.
Yeah, well, Chair Gromko, members of the board, thank you for having me back tonight. I'm going to share my screen. The first thing I want to share, where are you, is what you just mentioned, our March 3rd, 2021 tech memo. And how come I can't find it? Where are we? Oh, right. Can you see my screen?
Not yet. There we go. That's going to work now.
Okay. I have on the screen our tech memo submitted in early March. As just a quick overview, there's 9 sections. I think many of you have probably read it. You've heard pieces of it from me, certainly at the February and the March meeting. This memo memorializes our review of everything that was received to date. I'm going to walk through the first 8 sections with you very quickly. The last section is reserved for key summary findings, recommendations, and outstanding information as of the date of this memo. If you remember, early March also, there was a flurry of correspondences back and forth. The applicant had submitted a bunch of filings in response to the February meeting discussions. Chair Gromko, you put out a memo on the February 20th, canvassing for alternate sites that were being put in front of Verizon to evaluate further. So March 3rd is it's only about a month ago, but a lot's happened since then. And I think what we'll hear during the regular meeting session tonight is Verizon has some new information that they'll be providing that responds to this memo that I'm about to go through, planning board discussions, and including those alternate sites. So just bear that in mind as I go through this now. Little overview on the first couple pages. The 9 sections are bulleted out up front. Overview of the application. Some images are embedded for you, so you don't have to go back and forth to the drawings. Talking about the 3 sectors, the type of equipment, the dimensions, and the locations being proposed on the roof of 119 Columbia Street. I always like to give a summary of application filings and completeness, which I did, charting out the 5 or 6 applicant submittal dates and all the information that was provided going back to the onset of this in August, September 2020. We conducted a site visit. Some of you on the board were there. I think that was very helpful to get on the roof. Talked a lot about coverage and capacity, the 2 issues that justify a need for any cell site. And in this case, our analysis of Verizon's equipment, their need, their existing on-air cell sites in Hudson and surrounding communities. At that time, we had an alternate site analysis. There were 4 locations that were evaluated in detail. That's one of the things that we're waiting on, some supplemental alternate site analyses. And I thank the planning board for helping me develop a list. Boots on the ground. I did a site reconnaissance on March 8th also to come up with some potentially viable alternatives. But at the time of this tech memo, there were several alternates that were evaluated that we reviewed based on the technical information provided by Verizon. We dedicated a few pages of this memo to the conformance with radio frequency emissions. We always view that as a very important subject matter. I asked for a bit of supplemental information regarding the proposed antenna arrays. So that's been provided. Some of that information is projected right into this memo. Visual impact analysis, including the aesthetics. I had recommendations for stealth screening, which we're going to hear more about during the regular meeting tonight, but also what the applicant has gone through in terms of SHPO, their filings. They have a cultural resources person that was brought in early on in this application, and there was filings that were done 2020 and 2019 and 2020 with the State Historic Preservation Office. I have notes on structural and safety, and then section 9 is that last bullet, trying to summarize all the key findings. The recommendations that we put forth, site-specific to this project, and then the outstanding information. So plan view of the subject site. Here's a view from the drawing set. 3 sectors, you see those smaller blue circles, alpha, beta, and gamma sectors. Gamma is off towards the west, you would say. Each of these sectors has 2 proposed panel antennas, a total of 6 antennas on the rooftop. Near the central portion of the roof is Verizon's equipment. Those are equipment cabinets, radios, base radios. No generator is proposed on the rooftop. There is some battery backup, but a fairly small installation on dunnage set back from the rooftop, which is good. And some ancillary equipment is maintained in that area. You could see some of these black lines that run, and what those are cables that are run between the central equipment compound and the 3 antenna sectors. Those would be out of view. Those are adhered to the rooftop surface itself. In cross section, so this would be looking southward, if you will, if you were standing in Columbia Street, looking at the 119 Columbia Street Providence Hall building. What's been proposed initially, 3 sectors, alpha and beta, and the gamma sector would be off to your right, closer to the water. You could see the rooftop height measured from the surrounding grade, and also the penthouse height, which is a little blurry here, but it's between these 2 antennas off on the left or the eastern part of the building. Got some descriptions of the equipment. I do note at a couple places in this memo, this is 4G equipment. I have conditions that are proposed, should this be entertained further, regarding any changes to 5G. And certainly in March, we heard testimony from Verizon about 5G and that this is not proposing 5G services. So there's certainly some discussion on the record from the March meeting. Without running through in detail, just an inventory of the application materials. These are the major submittals that have come in. August 20th was when this was, I think, officially dropped off. HDR got involved in September. I know there were some pre-application meetings earlier in 2020 between the planning board and the applicant, but the August submittal was really their first full submittal, going through the required city forms. They provided a drawing set, RF information, justification for the site. They did have some coverage maps. They had a lighting statement by the FAA. There's no lighting that's going to be required based on its height on the rooftop or configuration on the rooftop. In October, Young Summer submitted more information regarding the FCC shot clock that your board and all boards across the US are adhered to now. It's an FCC order that looks to control time of review of applications. And as I think everyone knows, that shot clock date has been extended a few times now to allow the review of this, which I think is very important. I think it's good that that happened. In November, Young Summer, who's been representing Verizon, responded to an HDR memo in October where we asked for a bunch more information. So a little bit more on the application filings. We had plenty of questions on the drawings and the equipment specifications. We wanted to see the lease agreement that was in place with the property owner. I wanted to understand better the relation between Verizon and this particular property owner or property manager. We definitely had some questions at this time on the visuals that were prepared. The planning board also had comments that some of the earlier photos were taken in on-leaf season. Of course, when the leaves are down, that's your possibly your worst case visual view, even for a rooftop site, not just towers, but for a rooftop site. So more information came together in November. I had asked at that time also for more enhanced radio frequency emission information. That was provided. I wanted backup on SHPO, meaning I just don't want to see a letter. I want to see what they provided to the agency and connect the dots of what the agency actually reviewed and their determination that was issued. There was a slide deck that was prepared in late December. More in January came in to this board. That was based on our memo number 2 of completeness, where we still had some additional questions and clarifications even after the second submittal back in November. And then we roll into 2021. There was responses from the applicant responding to a number of public questions that came in and that have continued to come in. There was also a letter in support of the application. February 11th, there was a letter from the Verizon RF engineer. So that got into the February 9th planning board meeting discussions, talking on some of the questions that came up. And overall, our completeness review, I'll point to this green text. Under our recommendations and outstanding information that we noted, there still is more information that we're expecting, even as of tonight. I understand that that's going to be presented during the regular session tonight. And I do anticipate all that will be submitted in writing as an official filing following tonight. So HDR will have a supplement. But the long and short of it is, through those filings that are charted out above, we do feel that the applicants have been responsive to our questions at this time. We feel that they've provided things in accordance with the city code, chapter 284. And there's a number of recommendations that if this is approved, if it is constructed, if that's what ends up happening, there's a number of recommendations that the applicant's going to have to adhere to long term. And I'll go through some of those in just a little bit. Site visit of the roof. This is a view of the rooftop from the penthouse area looking out towards the river. That's the existing utilities and equipment that is on the roof now at this time. And this is back in the other corner of the roof away from the riverside. And that's the penthouse that exists. Without going through too much on this, although I know it's important and I trust that you've read this over, I did talk about really the 2 criteria that define needs for a site: capacity and coverage. And what I've discussed in here is taking a hard look at the existing Verizon network. These are sites that are on air and active. You could see what they call Hudson is actually at the hospital, so just a little bit to the east. There's another one in Hudson to the east of Lorenz Park. They call it Lorenz Park. It's not actually in Lorenz Park, but you've probably seen this driving up on 9G off to the right. And then there's some sites to the north and south and a couple across the river in Athens and in Catskill. So we wanted to understand where those are in position to the proposed site. You can see the existing in green, the proposed in red. And then we asked about capacity of the nearest sites. Capacity defines when an existing cell site is overworked. And within capacity, there's a couple of key performance indicators that indicate unsuccessful calls, drop calls, network losses, deficiencies in the 4G network. And I'm just going to point you to a couple of these plots. These are all for the west-facing sector on the rooftop of the hospital. So this is an on-air site for Verizon, along with other carriers are on that rooftop at the moment. Without zooming in, if you look at the red dotted line, that's Verizon's network criteria. And you could see the trends, purple being low band, 700 megahertz, red being high band, 2100 megahertz. And you could see that they've been dancing above that target for a little while yet. Not always above it, but this is for one of the criteria called forward data volume. In July, I asked about this. I said, well, why in July did all of a sudden things get better at that hospital site? Why did they drop below that red dashed threshold line? And it was confirmed that there was an upgrade at that site. There were some enhancements last year, July 2020. But still since then, even with those enhancements, the data is showing an upcreep and an exceedance of the criteria.
Mike, just a note to watch the time.
Yep. These are a couple other criteria that are out, all in terms of capacity. This is called the average schedule eligible users. They've been above that criteria. And the third criteria, average AC, same thing. They were above, did some enhancements in July of last year, but now they're moving ahead of that again. So in short, I feel that the capacity information justifies the need for another site, a site, to alleviate that. The second part is coverage. And I'm not going to go through this, but I provided a number of different coverage maps in the tech memo. These are embedded images from the RF engineer report. And essentially looking at the gap in service for high band and low band. This is the high band. You could see reliable service coverage is lacking around that search ring, that red search ring. And that black spot in there is the proposed site. We're going to hear more about that from the applicant in a little bit. I'm just going to run right through my recommendations now, just to get through this. I know it's a lot in 15 minutes. But so far, the applicant filings and responses to our comments are satisfactory. There's been supplemental information provided, but there's also a few supplemental items we feel have to be responded to that are still outstanding. We do feel that there is a need for a site in the downtown area within Verizon's search ring. And the rooftop at 119 Columbia, based on all the data, is going to serve that. It's going to remedy capacity. It's going to fulfill coverage needs for Verizon in the city of Hudson. We also know that predominantly the city will be serviced here as opposed to Greene County across the river. I just note for you, and I know you're aware of this, your code has a priority of siting. This is a number 2 priority. RF emissions are compliant. And then our recommendations, there's several that are in here. I'm not going to have time to go through, but from an aesthetic point of view, your code mentions stealth screening, and we do recommend that. At first, it was not recommended by the applicant. They then recommended it or agreed to it for one sector. And I think tonight during the regular session, we're going to hear a little more about what they're proposing in terms of fully screening the facility, all 3 sectors. I went through the outstanding information before tonight, and there's a few bullets here, and I think most of these have been responded to. Some are in the works of being responded to. And for the planning board, we'll submit a supplement. I promise you not as long as this all-encompassing memo, but I do want to include everything since March 3rd, including what we're going to hear from the applicant tonight. So I think I'll stop there at the moment. I know my 15 is about up.
Thanks, Mike. All right, Kathy, I'm going to turn this over to you and your team.
Okay, thank you. Allison has, well, I should say, we as a team have prepared a presentation and Allison is going to kick it off. Allison
Hello, everyone.
Phillips is an attorney with Young Summer.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. That's all right with the board. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Can everyone confirm that they're seeing the screen here, the first cover page, the Verizon presentation?
Looks good, Allison.
Great. Just to give you a quick overview of the presenters that will be taking part in this presentation, we have Charlie Du Bois here from Aerosmith Development. He's our site acquisition specialist. Also, Richard Suhaki, the Verizon Wireless RF engineer. You have Kathy Pomponio here on behalf of Verizon Wireless, and also myself for Young Summer. We're going to start the presentation with an overview by Rich Suhaki. This is going to focus on our radio frequency analysis. Some of this information was presented by Mike in his presentation, but just, quick general overview. We're proposing a facility at 119 Columbia Street. It is a wireless communications facility that's permitted at this location by special use permit and site plan approval by the planning board. The facility consists of 6 new Verizon antennas and also rooftop equipment that Mike already gave a preview of. Rich's presentation is going to focus on the facility objectives and also give you an overview on how the facility proposes to achieve those objectives, and with specific focus on how we developed the search ring that guided our site acquisition analysis.
All right, good evening, board members. Again, I'm Rich Suhaki. I'm the RF design engineer for Verizon for your area. Just want to start out just giving a quick definition, quick description. Mike had already touched on this, but as far as how we come about when we need a new site, when sites need to be upgraded and so on. So as you can see, there's 2 main drivers. There's actually many drivers, but the 2 main ones are coverage and capacity. Any cell site gives you both coverage and capacity, no matter where it's located and what's around it. The coverage can basically be defined as existence of usable cell signal, both the usable signal and the quality of that. You really need both the quality and the coverage itself to get a decent call, out of there. Capacity is really more defined as the amount of traffic, both voice and data, that a given site can process before significant performance degradation occurs. Now this, as it shows, I don't want to just kind of read it verbatim, but when the limits are met or exceeded, basically the user experience will tend to degrade significantly, whether you can't get on a call or just your experience is just a poor experience. There's lots of different things that can happen when you don't have the capacity or the coverage. One way to look at it is kind of like a congested highway. If you think of it that way, if the road is overloaded, traffic tends to stop and you're not going anywhere, you can't get additional cars on the road. You could add lanes to this road, which would add capacity. You can get more cars on, but only to a certain level. Once you've met the level there, you can't do any more, you're kind of stuck. At this point, it's very similar to when we add carriers. We added capacity to the Hudson Hospital. Once we're done and we can't upgrade that site anymore, the only option is to add an additional site. We analyze, this all gets analyzed, daily through our system performance engineers. And they'll look at this, and what we do is we find these areas, we look at the stats, we then run propagations. We will then optimize surrounding sites if we can by adjusting azimuths, down tilt, et cetera, new antennas, new technologies. Like we did to Hudson, we added all frequencies that we have there, which is generally what we try to do. Then, once everything's analyzed, we would then, or everything's given, we would then analyze it even further scientifically. We're using available tools, stats, mapping software, propagation tools, which will show us terrain, it will show us building clutter, building heights, roads, etc. It's very specific. From here, we'll develop a very specific search ring. It's not just a circle on a map. It'll show you exactly where this site needs to be to both give us the coverage and relieve the capacity of the surrounding areas. So it's very specific. In general rule of thumb is if the site is within the search ring and meets the minimum height required, which on this one was 50 feet. If it generally meets those two, it'll generally work. If it's outside of the search ring or does not meet the height requirement, in general, it doesn't work. There are exceptions to everything, but as a rule of thumb, that's generally the way it is. All right, so we are on slide 5. So with the search area process, once we've identified that we need some capacity or coverage in a certain area, we then analyze all the existing Verizon site locations, again, like I already went over. We will then look at other sites that Verizon is not on. We try to go with co-located sites first, whether there's an existing tower, an existing rooftop, anything that may be available, we would try to do those first. If those are not available, we'll then look around within the search ring. We create that search ring. We have our team go in and analyze everything in there, which Charlie will get into this a little bit further in a little bit. So we send that search area out to get analyzed. They drive every road. They look at every building. They take everything they can with all the regular, the requirements that we're looking for, whether it be the height requirements, the frequencies that we need, the technologies we're going to be using, equipment needs, and so on. Once those candidates are collected, they're then sent back to myself or another RF engineer. We will analyze them and rank them. And then we go from there. We'll do an initial design of the site, showing what frequencies we're going to use, what antennas would be optimal, what azimuths would be optimal for that location. And then we run propagations on that again as well to see how well it'll fill in and meet the desired needs. Once we do that, generally a design visit is completed to make sure that we can, in fact, get everything that we need out of this site. Sometimes we could say that we need a certain azimuth, and then you get to the building and that azimuth just won't work. So that's why we go and do hands-on site visit as well. You can flip over to the next slide. So this is a picture of the actual search area for Hudson. So this is what we want to basically be within here and at a 50-foot level. I believe there was only a couple of buildings in here. Off to the right gives you a little bit more description. I don't need to read through all of that. We kind of covered that. If you go down to the next one. These are the existing sites. Again, Mike got into this. So I don't need to go too far on it, but it's all the existing sites that are on air right now. And then the one in the center is the Hudson downtown site that we're proposing, which will then give us the coverage and offload. We'll actually offload Hudson and Lorenz Park and surrounding sites, but it's most drastically going to help out Hudson. All right. Again, this gets into the capacity, the definitions, like Mike got into, the forward data volume, the average schedule eligible user, and the average active connections. Don't really need to go through that too much, I don't believe. The next slide, again, Mike, you kind of touched on this a little bit. What it's showing here with the forward data volume is that we are meeting that and exceeding the 100%. In general, you don't want to even be close to 100%. As soon as you hit 100%, you start to degrade the service. So you really want to be below 100% always. including during busy hours. So, you know, the way cell sites work, it's kind of a living, breathing system. You know, at 8 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock at night, it's drastically busier than it is in any other time. And that tends to be the most important times for people where you don't want to have block calls or not be able to get on the call at all. So as you can see here, like Mike touched on, in July, we upgraded the Hudson Hospital site to include all of the frequencies that we have. We upgraded the antennas, all the technology we can on that. It's maxed out. It does everything, all available frequencies that we have. You can hop over to the next one. Again, this is showing the average active connections. So this is the amount of, you know, the number of connections that users are utilizing. Again, you can see that we were far over on the 700 megahertz band, and AWS was creeping up. We did the upgrade and it got better, but it's still creeping up again and getting above 100% on many days. Click on the next one. Again, so this is the average scheduler eligible user, which is basically measuring the control channels for that site. And you can see that we were drastically above before, you know, up in the 3,000%, 4,000%. So it was a very poor user experience, especially as you got down into the areas closer to where we're at the bottom, closer to the river, because once you get further away from the site, your experience will obviously get worse. You can see once we upgraded in July, it got better, but we're still well above 100%. It pretty much never goes below 100% on here. You can hop over to the next one. So the coverage plots, I'll just basically explain. So they're shown in neg 95 and neg 105. The difference is this is in negative dB. So neg 95 is actually stronger than neg 105. So it's actually the lower the number, the stronger it is. So with this, in general, neg 105 will give you outdoor coverage. It'll give you okay in-car coverage, but mostly outdoor coverage. It will not give you in-building coverage, and certainly not reliable in-building coverage. So we generally work on neg 95. This will give you decent in-building coverage. And it does vary. If you're in, you know, a brick building with neg 95 outside, it still will not be good on the inside of the building at times. Depends on how many windows you have, where the building's located, how far away from the site it is, what kind of terrain there's around you. So there's a lot to it. But neg 95 is generally the rule of thumb to give you decent in-building coverage. Hop over to the next one. And so this slide is showing you, again, Mike touched on this. So this is the 700 megahertz carrier current coverage, what you have right now. So anything within the blue area is the neg 95 coverage. Anything that isn't blue is below that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's completely no service. It's just very poor. Some of those areas are no service. So again, this is showing the 700. If you hop over to the next slide, it'll show you the AWS. So AWS is actually key. As you can see, it doesn't travel nearly as far because it's 2100 megahertz, so it doesn't travel as far as 700, any of the low bands. This is key. This is where most of the traffic resides. Generally, the high bands have a much wider bandwidth. And with a higher bandwidth, you get more capacity, you get faster, and everything works faster, and just you get more customers on it and a much better experience. So this is the key. If you hop over to the next slide. So this is a propagation of what the 700 megahertz coverage will be with the proposed new site at 119 Columbia Street. So as you can see, it drastically increases the 700 megahertz band. To where everything around the downtown Hudson area is covered quite well. You hop over to the next one. So this one is the AWS, the 2100 megahertz carrier. And again, so you can see it covers just about everything that we need. Again, this is the one that we really need for capacity. So we show the 700 meg, we show the 2100. Really, 2100 is the key for getting all of our coverage here. One thing I forgot to note, if you look at the circle here, that's actually not the search ring. So the search ring is smaller. If you, we don't need to, but if you go back to the first slide, it's kind of the same general shape, but it's smaller. This area on here is actually the target area. So this is the area we want to cover, not necessarily where the site needs to be. The search area is within the target area always, and it's generally, much smaller in size. I think I'm good. I think we can go to Charlie.
Thanks, Rick. The next part of the presentation is going to be presented by Charles Du Bois, and he's our site acquisition specialist from Aerosmith Development. This part of the presentation, we're going to go through the different criteria and evaluation of different candidate sites within that search area ring that is established by the RF engineer. That's the area that we know we need to locate the facility in order to be able to achieve the project objectives, the capacity, and the coverage that we need in the target area that Rick just went over. So we'll go through the site selection process with Charlie, and we'll also have some propagation maps that Rick can present as the presentation goes through the different alternatives that we considered. And for purposes of the workshop, we're going to focus on the 4 new sites that the planning board asked us to evaluate as potential alternative locations. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie.
Thank you, Allison. Hi, I'm Charlie Du Bois. Good evening, members of the board. We can go to the next slide here. So as Rick mentioned, this is the search ring that's issued at the beginning of the site selection process. This is the first thing I get, and it shows me the area of which I can begin looking for sites that would be a good candidate for co-location or a new site. So if we skip to the next slide, we can see sort of an overview of the process. So what starts the process is what's called the desktop scrub. So the first thing I do is I examine the city's code and determine siting preferences or any other parameters that the code dictates we should work in. So in this case, as you know, there is a hierarchy of preferred siting. It's shown there with city-owned properties, existing structures that are owned by the city, number 1, and then existing towers or structures, number 2. So I then go through the ring and I take in a number of factors. Number 1 is existing structures. I look for existing buildings, towers, anything like that, taking into effect topography and ground elevation. I have to keep in mind the minimum height that RF needs, which in this case, as Rick said, is 50 feet. I also look at other factors, historic districts, wetlands, flood zones, anything that will be a mitigating factor on a site. I also look at the character of the neighborhoods, avoid being in residential neighborhoods and that sort of thing. So if we go to the next slide here, you can see sort of the result of that preliminary analysis. Everything in red is what I've broadly termed infeasible for a variety of reasons. It's a residential structure, the tower, or the buildings rather, are not of sufficient height. The ground elevation is too low. It could be a floodplain, that sort of thing. The green are the feasible candidates. So those are 2 candidates you're familiar with, are Bliss Towers and Providence Hall. Those are the only buildings in the area that meet Verizon's RF or minimum height, I should say. So what I do is I take these candidates, and as Rick said, I submit them to him for review. So we can go to the next slide. These are all the candidates that were considered or that were suggested by the board for further consideration. A and B are Bliss Towers, Providence Hall, and then everything else below that is other candidates. So I don't just do a desktop scrub in my process, I should say. I also do a ring drive, as Rick mentioned. So I visit the property, visit the whole ring, drive every part of it to make sure that it matches my understanding of it. There's no new development. I also look for any potential new towers that might be going up, that sort of thing. So these are all the candidates that were considered. So if we go to the next slide here, slide 23. As Allison mentioned, we're not going to go through all of these, but you can see A is Bliss Towers, and this is number 1 in the city's preference, but it's not available to us. Bliss Towers, as you're aware, we submitted a letter in our initial submission that they are no longer interested in allowing us to lease space there. So number 2, which is Providence Hall. So for our purposes, in the interest of time, we'll review the new ones that were just suggested by the board and that Mike Musso forwarded to us. That would be starting with candidate I. Skip ahead there. So this is the Columbia County Board of Elections building. It is outside of the search area, and it is lower than Verizon's minimum height. It's 40 feet tall as opposed to the 50 of Providence Hall. So as Rick mentioned, the search ring is very important. We want to stay inside that at all costs, but we did further evaluate this, and we can go to the and found it didn't meet our needs. So if we go here, Rick, you can speak more about the propagation map here and what it shows.
Yep. Yeah. So as you can show, I ran the props the same way. The only difference I changed, instead of the color for the green for the proposed, I changed it to the pink to give you a little difference. As you can see with the 700 megahertz carrier, it covers pretty good. Doesn't cover everything, especially not down by the down by the river, but it covers pretty decent. Where we start to run into issues is if you hop over to the next slide with AWS. So again, as you can see with the 21 megahertz carrier, it's actually severely lacking. It doesn't cover the vast majority of what we're looking for. So you'd see like down by the river and down on the south and even parts north, it doesn't cover. This is kind of twofold. It's lower, like Charlie said, it's outside of the actual search ring. It's inside of our target area, but outside of the search ring. What happens here, though, is not only does it not provide enough coverage, it's also too close to the Hudson Hospital. So it won't actually draw the traffic away from the hospital as well. So the hospital is going to cover pretty much all the way up to that site, as you can see. Then the site will only cover a little bit further. So the net gain is actually very small by adding this site. And hop over to the next one.
This is another candidate suggested by Mike and the board. This is a 3-story building. Again, it's lower than Providence Hall. This is at 40 feet. This is within the search ring. It is located in the historic district, but similar, this does not meet the minimum requirements to accomplish our objectives. And we can go to the prop maps, and Rick, you can speak on this as well.
Okay, so again, now these, I don't want to kind of sound like a broken record, they're all relatively similar. The 700 megahertz covers pretty decent. As you hop over to the next one with AWS again, as you can see, it's still lacking significantly. Now it's a little bit more north of the area that was in question before. So again, it just doesn't cover enough of the AWS frequency to really offload Hudson Hospital that's needed. So it doesn't give us the coverage or the capacity to offload. Hop to the next one.
Again, some similar information. This is a 3-story building. This is lower than Providence Hall. It is inside the search ring, but it also does not meet RS objectives. So we can show the props again.
Okay, and similar situation, you can see with 700, it covers pretty well. Actually, it covers just about everything we need. It does not cover to the north, but the Hudson Hospital and Lorenz Park are covering that part up there well enough anyways. Again, if you hop to the next one and look at the AWS coverage, the 2100 megahertz, again, so it's not filling the area that we need, especially a little bit to the north there where you can see the hole again, where there's actually quite a bit of traffic gets pulled from there. So unfortunately, this has the same issue as the others, where the capacity frequency just won't be covered well enough.
This is another one suggested by the city. This is actually a proposed tower site. This would be. This is not an existing structure. This is also outside the search ring. This is an area southeast of the Harney and Sons building. I think it's city property. As you can see, this is not the highest preference for the zoning code. It would be a new tower. You can see to the south, we have some residences nearby, residential areas to the southwest and the southeast by the baseball fields. So even with a new tower, and Rick can get into this further, this is not going to accomplish the objective because it's just not decided properly. So if we can go to the propagation map, we have, I think this is would be a proposal for a 100-foot tall tower.
Right. So yeah, so I ran the props here at 100 and at 150 just to show what 2 different heights would give us the net gain. So again, if you show the 700, it covers decent, but on the lower part, even a 100-foot tower doesn't get in as well as the building would get in on even on the 700 megahertz. If you look at the next slide with the AWS again, so it's lacking quite a bit. The reason for this is kind of twofold. One, it's outside of the search ring to the north. It's also getting blocked by the actual buildings that are already there, including the building that we were proposing to go on is blocking the signal. So you can see that pretty much right where those line of buildings are, it's blocked to the bottom and won't help anybody down at the lower part of Hudson there. Hop over to the next slide with the 700 megahertz. Again, so this is at 150 feet. with the tower, with the proposed tower. It does cover 700 better, and would probably, it's not too bad on the 700 megahertz. If you go to the next one, it gives you AWS again. So again, as you can see, to the south, it's still blocked. So it's not getting enough signal to the south at the lower part down near the river where we really need it. I didn't run any further than this, and the reason behind it is once you get above 150, and even add 150 for that point, it starts to cause interference to all the other surrounding sites. So when you're designing sites, you're not just looking for the tallest site around. You're looking for the site that matches what you need, where you need it, and the height you need, because there is such thing as too short, there is a such thing as too tall. Once we get above that, we're starting to get all the interference, and it would actually make the entire network significantly worse instead of helping it, and the user experience would be much worse on that. I think that is what I have for those.
Thanks, Charlie and Rick. That's the presentation we have prepared for the workshop portion of the meeting. We do have a discussion of alternative on-site designs that we are prepared to discuss in the regular meeting. But with the remaining time left in the workshop, we'd like to open it up to any questions from members of the board regarding the presentation or any other questions that the board has for us.
So board members, feel free to ask questions. I want to thank the Verizon team and Mike for going through this so carefully. That was very good. My understanding improved quite a bit.
I have one question.
John, yes.
I understand the height requirements. I noticed that you've noted the buildings, but in my sense, if a building and its altitude is higher than your proposed site, how does that factor? How does the altitude of the building factor in with the height of the building?
So are you talking how the ground elevation of the building affects it? Like if it's in higher terrain?
Correct.
So it does affect it.
Okay.
It's kind of a combination of both. So for example, if there was, let's just, apples to apples, if you had a 50-foot building down lower and another 50-foot building at a 20-foot higher elevation,
Right.
in the same spot, it would generally be better. If it starts to go outside of the search ring, which generally does here, as you start to get outside of the search ring, that's where the elevation goes higher up towards the hospital when we get too close to the hospital. Along with that, though, it's not just there. You also have to take into account the clutter, which is basically what all the buildings around it. So it has to not only be higher in elevation, it has to be higher than everything around it as well. So for example, if that's a 50, again, we're just going, pick a 50-foot building, but all the buildings around it are 60-foot, it doesn't help us at all. So it's a combination of both ground elevation and building elevation, which is how we get our ACL, which is an antenna center line.
Right.
So the antenna center line wants to be higher than everything around it.
Okay. The reason I ask, just as an example, St. Mary's School, there's not much clutter around it, and it is at a higher elevation. I believe it might be in the ring. And can you explain how it works? Would you still have to consider clutter? Because I would think that at its altitude, its height, it would be higher than almost all the buildings around it.
Yeah,
I'd residential areas.
I'd have to go down. Right. Yeah, I'd have to go down there and look again. See further on that specific one. Yeah. But it is further. It's further south. Further south, right, as well. So it starts to get outside of where the coverage is needed. So if you were to, you did hop back to that. Actually, Allison, can you hop back to slide 50, I think? So yeah, so you can see the actual amount of coverage that it does is decent per se for its elevation and for its height, but it's still not getting out there to the north. It's getting blocked. And I can change, if you look at the antennas, that's showing the azimuths. I can change those azimuths and it doesn't really improve it any. Okay. So there are buildings to the north of it that are either taller than it or even the same height as it, or it, again, just could be the elevation. Even though it's taller, there could be a hill between it. It could be a lot of things. On here, you can also see that the Hudson Hospital, the blue is actually covering it stronger. so to the north. So the Hudson Hospital has a more direct route to that north than this has. It's just that it's basically running out of steam by the time it gets there. So,
Okay, thanks.
So you are
Yep, well-
considering not just the height of the building, but the height of the terrain? I mean, do you have
yes.
and you actually have in your possession how high the terrain is? I
Yes,
see.
we have. So in our tools, it's extremely powerful tools. They run, everything is in there. All buildings are in there. 3D buildings are in there. All ground elevations in there. Water is in there. What is down there, even down to other towers are in there. So it's extremely extensive and very complete database. It's very, very accurate. It's
So we have about-
it's better than 95% accurate.
We have now less than 10 minutes. I have a few questions. They don't particularly have to be answered right this minute, but I want to get them out. I'd like to know if 119 Columbia Street wasn't an option. Let's just say it wasn't an option for any, pick a reason, it doesn't exist. That's a good one. What would you guys be choosing? What site would you be choosing? That's what I'd like to know. It was mentioned that there was an upgrade at the hospital, and Mike mentioned that. So how does an upgrade work? If you're going to do an upgrade, does that need to come back to the board?
Yes.
You know, it does.
Yeah, in general, if anything's changed out, antennas are changed out, and I'm sure Kathy or Charlie can speak to this better than myself. But yeah, anytime something is physically upgraded, it has to get approval with whatever's in the rules, like Mike Musso had alluded to.
But
Yeah.
if they come to the board for an upgrade, we would probably have a hard time saying no, by some, reg, right?
Yeah, there's that eligible facilities request, the FCC that I had noted.
Mhm.
My tech memo has a number of recommendations, and it certainly drives that home for this applicant.
Right.
That is a requirement. A special permit would be needed per the code as it's written now to do
But
some
we'd
kind
have,
of swap out.
but the board, would have a hard time saying no to it. Just the same way as, boards, communities have a hard time, dealing with this situation and saying no to them in general. Just like if another carrier now wants to go on this Columbia building, if they're approved, we would have a hard time saying no to them. We would have a hard time saying no to an upgrade in that same respect, right?
I think we need an explanation of what an upgrade is. What did that consist of? And is it just swapping materials?
That's what I took it to mean.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Yeah, so it would. Okay, so the upgrade, it could be many things. The upgrade that happened at the hospital, we changed out antennas, basically like for like antennas as far as size, weight, and so on. So like it doesn't really change the look much. What it was the internals on the antennas. Just like anything, just like your phone gets better every year, antenna technology gets better every year. Frequencies, we're a lot of different frequencies. We have many different frequencies that were licensed by the FCC, and we're obligated to use those frequencies and utilize them, otherwise we lose them. So part of the upgrades are not only just like for this in the Hudson area where we needed to for capacity, we will sometimes need to upgrade them because we have to use that frequency. If we don't use it, we lose it. So on here, we upgraded the antennas to allow to use all of our frequencies, which is 700, 850, PCS, and AWS. So the new antennas will allow us to do that. The equipment in the shelter had slight upgrades, but the antennas themselves were upgraded. The lines were not upgraded. And it just basically now utilizes our entire frequency list instead of just, I believe it had 3 before.
I just want to note, thank you for that. Again, this has been noted before. I want to note it again that your preferred location on Columbia Street, half of that coverage is maybe even, visually it looks like at least maybe a little bit more than half of the coverage is the Hudson River and parts of Athens. And then I just, I'm sorry, the last speaker, and I'm sorry, I didn't write down your name, mentioned when going through some of the other options that the board suggested, one of the reasons why it was not a good choice, and there were other reasons, but one of the reasons is that it's residential. And I have to tell you that, 119 Columbia Street is definitively residential. You can't get more residential than, 119 Columbia Street. So I find it interesting that one of the reasons why you're not considering other spots is residential. I don't know. I didn't get the I didn't write fast enough getting all the names of the list that you went through, which I don't think was everything that we had proposed. But to me, the second one seemed pretty good, and St. Mary's seemed pretty good, and it seemed as though they were workable in some way. But again, this is the first time we're getting this information, so we need, I need to know more. I assume we all need to know more.
Can I follow up when you're done, Laura?
I want to go back to my big point, which is if 119 Columbia Street didn't exist, was not available, wasn't there, what would be your option? I'd like to know the answer to that, but not today. Go ahead. Sorry, Clark.
No, it's good. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted to follow up and thank you for all your great questions. I appreciate the response that technology gets better. I would also like a response to the question of, say you cite it in a less than optimal location. To my understanding, it's not necessarily our obligation to agree to the best your optimal location. If you cite it in a less than optimal location, what's the prospect of new technology coming down the pike that does meet your coverage criteria? In other words, it may be not perfect now, maybe 80% of what you want, maybe 75 or 90% of what you want. But with new technology, what's the prospect of you getting to your 100% or beyond?
So
I
with
mean,
that,
Go ahead, Red.
I'm sorry.
I can jump in
So
after
with,
you.
yeah, so with that question, it's actually generally when technology is changing, the frequencies are getting higher. So what's generally going to happen is when the frequencies get higher, like you can see with the difference between 700 and AWS, they actually covered less. So as we gain more frequencies up higher, you would actually get worse coverage if we were to only have that option. So with that, it doesn't, like, technology doesn't get better. Like RF travels as RF travels. That technology doesn't change. How good the antennas gets can change. And the technology behind it, how it works, can change. The actual RF is the same now as it always has been.
But I guess that's counter to what you just described earlier, that the advanced technology allows you better coverage or makes equipment work better. I get it that there's a physical constraint on radio frequency.
Right. So, yes. So what I was referring to on that was we had to add frequencies that we were not using at Hudson Hospital. So we didn't have, when that Hudson Hospital was built, we didn't own those frequencies. Thus, the antennas that we were using there were not capable of producing those, of utilizing those frequencies. So we had to upgrade the antennas to do that. When we build a site now, we use antennas that use all of our frequencies. So they would, no matter where we go now, it would get all of the frequencies. Back then, we didn't have those frequencies available. So when we upgraded, we're upgrading it.
The hospital was related to new frequencies that you gained access to.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
The upgrade at the hospital was related to new frequencies that you gained access to?
Correct.
Okay, board, it is 6 o'clock. So I'm gonna call this workshop to a close. Kathy, did you have one thing you wanted to say after Rick?
No, I was just going to say that, you asked the question about, perhaps it, could be workable in the future. I mean, I want you to understand, this is a big investment for Verizon. That Verizon's not going to make that kind of an investment unless it works right now. So, I mean, that's the challenges that we face. I want you to understand that if we didn't have a true need to be here, we wouldn't be going through all of this with you. And to answer Laura's question about if this candidate was not available to us for some reason, we would be coming to you to propose a tower within that search ring.
Well,
That would be the next step.
But we proposed a couple of sites that would be tower, for a
They were
tower.
outside of the search ring.
They're outside the search ring. They're
And
not
Laura-
inside the search ring. They're outside the search ring.
Laura, a group of us got together before, in between, in the intervening weeks, and we eliminated some of the sites because they were outside the search ring and they weren't viable. So there is a tower included here because we thought it was important, really important to look at that, and that's on the city-owned property near Harney. But we were trying to keep what we asked Verizon to do all these propagation maps within the search ring. We were trying to keep sites that actually made sense before we had them look
There
at
were two places where there were for towers in
And-
their list.
That's right. And one of them didn't work.
Right, but I don't remember hearing about the other one in this conversation, but maybe we did, and I was writing a note and I didn't hear it. Anyway, Betsy, it's 6:01, so.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we need to, so thank you everyone for participating in this workshop. I appreciate it. So now because we have a quorum, I'm going to open our regular planning board meeting. And if you all want to stop screen sharing, great. Thank you very much. Okay, so welcome to our April 13th, 2021 City of Hudson Planning Board meeting. One thing that I want to note is that when we get to public comments, we're going to keep public comments to 3 minutes, and we will be timing those in order to give everybody a time to participate. I also want you all to know that the planning board has just completed a 1-hour workshop with Verizon. And another special meeting that is coming up on April 27th at 6 p.m. will be to continue our review of the Colarusso application at 175 South Front Street. So we'll be continuing our work on Colarusso in a couple of weeks. I'm going to try to keep the 3 public hearings we have tonight to 45 minutes each. And we also have some new business at the end of the meeting. So this is the continuation of a public hearing for 119 Columbia Street for a special use permit application from Bell Atlantic Mobile Systems, DBA Verizon Wireless, to install and operate wireless communication equipment on the roof of 119 Columbia Street, Providence Hall. I do have a statement that I would like to read into the record. The planning board is in receipt of a flyer that was allegedly distributed to residents of Providence Hall, asserting that the proposed wireless telecommunications facility at Providence Hall would result in dangerous radiation and adverse health effects. The planning board was not aware of said flyer prior to its being submitted to the planning board by Mr. Tim Lamberto on March 12th, 2021. And today we confirm that the contents of said flyer will not in any way influence the planning board's review of the application. Although now part of the record, the planning board repudiates the content of said flyer and reaffirms that pursuant to FCC guidelines, the planning board is prohibited from considering potential health impacts of wireless telecommunications facilities as part of its review. The planning board is considering the proposed location of the wireless telecommunications facility, feasible alternative locations, and potential visual impacts from the facility on the community and the neighboring historic district. So let's open up. Mike, do you have some information we'd like to, there was part of the workshop that we moved to this portion of the meeting because I thought it was important for the public to hear. And so I'd like to open with a discussion in general of stealth screening, if you wouldn't mind. Kathy, if you'd like to jump in, please do.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here. Right. So I assembled a mini slide set tonight, and this isn't anything specific for the application at hand. Rather, it's just to put up some examples of real stealth screening that's been done on rooftops. Stealth technology is very popular in the realm of wireless telecommunication facilities, and frankly, in many other areas of our daily lives. You think of utilities on roofs. You think of utilities and ground covers rather than a vault. Sometimes it's a boulder that you drive by and you wouldn't know it. I digress a little bit, but what I wanted to put here is are just some general examples that are out. These are from vendors that HDR has worked with, and certainly Verizon and the other wireless carriers have worked with. Stealthing is very popular for tower structures, with mixed results, I think. We've all driven by stealth trees that we noticed. Maybe that stealthing isn't terrific, but I would submit we've probably driven by stealth trees that you didn't notice based on their antenna centerline height and other things. So just to dance through this quickly, I hope to give the board a little bit of some samples that are out. This is a site from a vendor, Stealth Concealment Solutions. These are chimneys. You can see there's an existing chimney on this rooftop. Off to the left here is actually something that's been fabricated, site-specific color matching. The materials actually are fiberglass to allow signal to come in and out to and from the antennas. But this rooftop element here, and just to zoom in a little bit more, is concealing antennas behind it. So I don't know the background of this building, if it's in or near an historic district, but it's a pretty smart device that helps shield panel antennas. Another example are these risers, very different geometry than the application at hand, but you get the idea. Some of the colors and textures could be worked in, rather well, and some details can be put on depending on what the existing building looks like. Here's a more utilitarian building. This looks like an apartment building to me. A utility penthouse on the roof, probably an elevator shaft. What you see above it is screening, fiberglass screening that would be hiding antennas. A little more decorative. This is in an urban area. I think this, I'm not sure where this is, but I want to say it's in one of the boroughs of New York City. Old Tudor, I guess you'd say, architecture or something like that. Off to the right is a stealth wall to hide some of the cabling and some of the antennas behind it. So rather than have antennas at the edge of a rooftop, and sure, you could paint those or maybe texture them a little bit, a stealth screen, probably takes the eye away if it's done correctly. Here's one that I worked on. It's a little bit blurry, but this is in Westchester County, Village of Bronxville, Concordia College. There's 3 wireless carriers on top of Feth Hall, which is an historic structure. Essentially, the middle parapet here, including the decorative and the parapets off to the left and right, are actually replaced material. The planning board there had spent some time with the applicant. I think the first applicant was T-Mobile in that case. And I think the carriers, T-Mobile and others, came on board because they knew this would be a pretty great site for them. They had a willing landlord who has a very good maintenance plan together. But the punchline is that there was quite a bit of thought and design that went into the stealth wall on that one. Here's one that I worked on. So these are some simulations. This is in the village of Havistraw in Rockland County along Route 9W. Northern Riverview retirement home. It's also a nursing home center. On the left, you could see looking up from Route 9W. And on the right is a riser that's put off a penthouse. So this was actually a Verizon application. I think this worked out pretty well in that driving down Route 9W, the color matches extremely well with that lighter tan that's on these 2 sides from where it's situated. So photo at the left is existing, photo at the right is built condition. So I just wanted to put a few of those out there. We've seen some stealth simulations for this project in the gamma sector, and I understand there may be some additional simulations being shared tonight for the first time.
Yes, there are. And if allowed, I would like for Allison to go through the second set of our presentation that shows just that.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, Allison, take it away.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. So if you all can see, I wanted to just go briefly over some of the alternative designs that we've talked about before the planning.
Allison, we can't see it yet.
Yeah, it's not up there yet, Allison.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There we go. Thank you.
Great. So I just wanted to go over some of the alternative on-site designs that some of these the planning board has seen before. We've talked about them already at past meetings, but we also have some new alternative designs involving stealthing that we'd like to present to the board tonight. So again, just to begin with an overview of the original design, consisted of 6 roof-mounted antennas in 3 sectors, 2 antennas per sector. Roof-mounted equipment in the center of the roof, and the antennas were an off-white color with no concealment structures. So I'll show you some photo simulations. These were included with the original project design. And again, here's a viewpoint looking southwest from North 2nd Street, east of the Bliss Towers. Again, you see the antennas with the white color. Looking northwest from number 228 Columbia Street. And again, you can see the installation. And a third viewpoint looking southeast from the intersection of North Front Street and Columbia Street. So during the planning board review process, Verizon agreed to incorporate stealth design features, including painting the antennas a color that matched the existing building exterior, but also designing a concealment structure for the gamma sector. So photo simulations of these proposed design alternatives. This is looking southwest from North 2nd Street, east of the Bliss Towers. And this is a viewpoint of the original antenna design, but with the paint color change to match the building exterior. This is another viewpoint looking northwest from number 228 Columbia Street. And a third photo showing, this is the gamma sector looking southeast from the intersection of North Front Street and Columbia Street. The next simulation shows that same gamma sector, but with a stealth enclosure. And the location of the gamma sector had to shift slightly with the addition of this concealment structure due to the structural considerations that we took into account when coming up with this alternative design. Now, tonight we wanted to present to the board a further further revision to the design that would actually include all of these sectors stealthed. That would involve combining the alpha and beta sectors on top of the existing penthouse and enclosing it with RF transparent concealment structure, similar to what Mike has just discussed during his presentation. The concealment structure design that we've come up with is intended to match the building exterior. And we're going to provide some excerpts from some updated zoning diagrams and also simulations to show you what that alternative design would look like. Here we have just the updated zoning diagram that shows the combination of the alpha and beta sector combined and with the proposed concealment structures. And you can see better on this proposed building elevation. You have the combined alpha and beta sectors here and the concealment structures, and then the gamma sector and concealment structure over here. Now this is an existing viewpoint of the gamma sector looking south, or the location of where the gamma sector would be located, looking southeast from the intersection of Prison Alley and North 2nd Street. And then this is a simulation of
Allison, just to correct you, that's actually alpha beta. That's the combo.
Apologize. Yep, I misspoke. Thank you, Kathy. Looking from this vantage point, this would be the location of the combined alpha beta sectors. So this is the existing structure and then the simulation showing the combined alpha beta sectors in the concealment structure. And then just to provide some examples of as-built concealment structure similar to what Mike just presented. This is an example of a concealment structure we used on a Hampton Inn in Saratoga Springs. You can see the concealment structure right here with the green arrow, and then the same structure from a different vantage point. And then just another photo simulation of an as-built. This is the Turf Inn in Colony, New York. And this is just another example of kind of that site-specific color matching that Michael talked about, where they designed the stealth structure to match the existing building exterior, including the brick and the solid trim. So that sums up the presentation of the alternative design. Again, we had proposed the stealth feature for the gamma sector before, but this updated design would include stealthing on all of the sectors. So we wanted to present that to the board and the public, and of course, open it up to any questions anyone has.
So board, before we open to public comment, do any of you have any questions or thoughts you'd like to share?
I have a question.
Clark.
Looking at your presentation, which I thank you for, it seemed to me there were other projects you had or that were presented that had the attendance combined in one location. I guess, given your desire to have height, I get it, location within the central zone. I guess my question is, after the presentation and the blocking, et cetera, why all of your alpha, beta, gamma sectors can't be combined together into one location for ease of screening?
I think
That is, okay. I can take it, or Rick, you can take it.
Yeah, I can get it. Basically, because the gamma sector that points west would be blocked by the building itself. The building is so long that if gamma was down there, the building would block it, so we wouldn't really get anything off of that.
And
Antennas are also down tilted as well, so they don't
alpha
just
and beta
transmit
are
straight
aiming
out.
forward? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so alpha and beta can go up there because they're pointing, basically north and east.
Okay.
And then gamma is pointing west. So if we were to go on that penthouse with gamma, the building rooftop itself would block it. Like I was saying, like all antennas generally get down tilted anywhere from 2, 4 to 8, even 10 degrees of down tilt. So with anything on there at all, it would end up getting blocked by the building itself. Otherwise, we would like to do that. It'd be a whole lot easier and less expensive for us.
Right. I think that's a great question. That's the model for cell towers, alpha, beta, gamma, 3 sectors with 2, 3, or 4 antennas in each. I agree with that. We've certainly looked at other projects, large surface area roofs. This is sort of a narrow roof if you think of its geometry and plan view, but the idea is to shoot westward, and you are going to get that shadowing from the building surface. So oftentimes wireless codes in some municipalities or questions that come up, why can't we just go back from the edge of the parapet, 50 feet, and then you wouldn't see this? You just can't. The antennas are raised above the roof surface to some point. It's a balancing act, but you will get that shadowing based on physical or mechanical down tilt with the antennas. But I think it's a very good question.
I'm sorry, Mike, Mike, can you hear me? So you said that the intention is to shoot east.
On that particular sector, yes.
So is that why the majority of, or at least half of the coverage is going into the river and Athens? I mean, because also the coverage needs to go north and south.
It does. So each array, they're not shooting perfectly directional. The main azimuth is eastward, but if you look at the propagations from each antenna, they are spread left and right to that center direction. typically antennas, cell towers, or rooftops, they're looking to cover 360 degrees. That's how networks are built. And this particular gamma sector, the one that they've proposed to stealth prior to tonight, that's generally facing in that east or northeast direction. That's right. But it's not just covering directly in that. But Laura, to your point, looking at those coverage maps, I think that was your observation from earlier. You could see the coverage at 700 megahertz getting into the Hudson River and getting into that piece of Athens. It's from that sector. That's right.
Right, but what you want to focus on that is looking at the AWS coverage. Like I was saying, the AWS is actually key, and if you look, AWS doesn't really get into Athens hardly at all, maybe just a little bit. So we're really focusing on AWS, but yeah, that section, the westward pointing section, does go over that way. And like Mike said, the idea is to cover a full 360 degrees whenever possible.
Right, and also for the board, radio signals don't end at political subdivision lines. So if the telecommunications provider has identified a gap, it doesn't really matter whether the gap is entirely in the city or not.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Victoria, that when you look at their maps, half of it's not in Hudson. So, as we look at alternative sites, I just think the choice that their preferred choice is we're obstructing our city to basically put a lot of coverage into the river. And I'm just wondering if there's other choices. I don't know.
I think you really have to focus on that AWS, the coverage plots for AWS. Because that really is a limiting factor here.
Okay, go ahead.
Other board members?
I had a question, Chairwoman.
Yes, Victoria.
I'm just wondering, I couldn't tell from these plans, how high would the tower be on top of the tower?
On top of the penthouse?
Yes.
I think this elevation drawing shows it the best. It's 69.2 feet to the top of the concealment structure where you would have the combined alpha beta sector, and then 59.6 feet to the top of the concealment structure on the gamma sector concealment structure.
Okay. Thank you.
How tall is the penthouse? Is that, I just can't read it on there.
My understanding, the top of the existing penthouse, I believe it's 58.9 feet.
Looking from the ground.
Turn it where you can zoom into that.
That's a good question.
Mike, are we talking from the ground up while she's looking?
Yeah, from above surrounding grade level. That's right.
Okay.
Try and zoom in.
Allison, did you get a chance to look at the zoning? I mean, does this match or is it consistent with the zoning?
Yes, we did review the zoning code, and my understanding is that there's no height limitation on the building within this zone, so we would be compliant with the zoning law. 58.9 to the top overall height of the structure, and that's to the top of the penthouse.
And you agree with that, Mike? That there's no zoning issue there?
Oh, I'm just seeing this tonight, so I'm going to have to talk about that in my supplement, Laura.
But we can double check with Craig on that. Board, other questions before we open it?
I have just one.
Sure, John.
Again, with the altitude, with the height of the antennas on the building, the southwestern end of Hudson is considerably at a lower point, with Warren Street and a lot of other structures in between. And based on your explanation before of structures blocking the signal, how does the signal benefit the southwest corner of Hudson? It's at a lower altitude, much lower altitude, but with a hillside and a number of buildings in the way. Can you explain that?
I'm not sure I follow you. So are you
Okay.
wondering how it's
All right,
propagating down that way, or
What's that?
are you wondering how it's propagating down that way,
Yeah.
or what?
Exactly, yeah. It's not
So-
line of sight. It's not line of sight because it's at a fairly low altitude. Not a fairly low, but it's at a lower altitude than Warren Street. You have the buildings on Warren Street, and once you get over beyond Union Street, there's a slope that goes down quite a number of feet to other residences, Cross Street, the train station, and those areas.
Right.
And none of it is line of sight with the antenna.
Right.
And I'm just wondering how that benefits this particular corner of town.
And that's actually where you live too, John, right?
Well, yeah, and I've had bad signal for a while.
Yeah.
But that aside,
So-
it's not just me. It's
So you'll know if it's working or not.
I'm just curious,
So again, with all the propagations, there's varying levels. If there's buildings like right next to, I think it's on the other side of Prison Alley, it's called. So there's buildings, but there's spaces in between all of those buildings. So
Right.
the signal will get through there. It doesn't get blocked 100% by a building. The more clutter that's in there, the more it gets blocked. It's not like it's a big lead shield, stopping 100% of the signal. So if you do look at the props, it is getting blocked in certain areas. It's a little more difficult on here. The very first submission I submitted, which Mike, you had on yours, where it shows a lot more colors instead of it just being like blue and green. The ones that show where it's got the oranges and the yellows, it shows varying levels. Whereas this is showing kind of like a 2D image of, all right, this is where we have neg 95 coverage. This is where we do not. The other one shows more detailed, where it'll show you neg 95, 75, 65, and so on. And that one will show you a lot more accurately that the signal is in fact getting blocked everywhere. The signal is not just, just there, and that's how it is.
Okay, I still don't get it. I explained this quite a while ago. When the towers were on the Verizon building near the post office, signal here was great. Once they got put up on the hospital, the signal went away. This is being moved closer, yes, but it's also being moved on the other side of a hill from where we are. So there's no line of sight. Does the signal arc to reach us? I mean, I thought it was just pretty much straight line stuff.
No, it doesn't arc. It can bounce. It can reflect off of buildings, and our tools do take that into account as well. It doesn't really arc. Again, I'm not sure exactly which area you're talking about, but what you're saying, what may be lower in signal, once these antennas are at their, was it 60-foot ACL, that angle might be a lot more reduced. Plus, like we were saying, the antennas are down tilted, and it'll get in areas, and like it's kind of hard to describe. So it gets, everything blocks it, but nothing's going to block it 100%. When you have gaps in between the buildings, in between roads, it will get through there. When you have solid buildings, it won't get through quite as much.
Okay, but how do you
the prop tool?
How do you account for the altitude though? I mean, it's downhill from there. If you know where the Hudson train station is, it's probably at about sea level. This building is not. It's.
Can you get back to the propagation, Allison, maybe?
Sure.
I mean, John's within your target area, so, and you have it lit that he's gonna get hit, but John's asking how. And Mike, maybe you can address this too, not to, it doesn't have to be today, but I think you might know Hudson a little better. And
Yeah, look, I remember in my 2-site reconnaissance, I went down to Water Street, looked at those developments. I think, John, you live on Union or in that area. There is a drop off driving out of town, going south at the end of Warren Street, hanging a left. These models do take into effect propagation. Line of sight, I think I mentioned that in my tech memo too, but I think sometimes it's a little bit of a misnomer. you could be near a tower like the Lorenz Park Tower up off of 9G. You may not see it, but you're going to be getting some service from it. Reflections are accounted in the screen coverage that's here. This is an urban area. There is some repeat of reflections that come off, and Providence Hall does peek through. If you do walk carefully by the boat launch parking lot up on that ridge right above it, you could catch a glimpse of this here and there. So the propagation maps, I think, are conservative. They're certainly not overdoing or being over optimistic with the coverage that would be provided. And you can see it does diminish as you go further south, further down the page on what's up on the screen right now. Reliable 2100 megahertz is going to start to fade away.
Another reason for asking is that there's proposals for a number of different developments in this area. And there's increased numbers of, there's the barn or kitties on by the train station. They're talking about doing Montgomery Street. And you know, there's going to be a lot more need for the signal down here, not mine notwithstanding. I mean, I've dealt with it for long enough. It doesn't really bother me that much, but you know, it's a thing where will the increased numbers also have an effect on numbers of people using it, also have an effect on the signal and the signal strength in this area?
I agree with the applicant earlier in that all sites provide capacity and there's some finite sense of capacity. I think sites get upgraded and they're continuously monitored over time. You know, the pace of approval and population change, if that's going to happen, I think this site's going to help that downtown waterfront area. And I discussed that in the tech memo. And that will keep the use and capacity in Hudson. Hudson residents will be closer than anything that you see on this map here in the river or a little bit on across the river in Athens. So John, yes, that is the trend with cell sites. The more bells and whistles that are provided, the more is used up, more devices that people have. You know, I think Verizon and other carriers, they're responding to some extent, right? To what's being put on their phones and what people are asking to get service out of. This site is in the heart of the downtown, and you know, you or someone else in that area right now, with that drop off going south from Warren Street, you could be getting some signal from the hospital, but maybe not great signal. The other thing is a site like this, the trends of cell splitting and enhancing capacity with a new facility, in this case, a new rooftop facility, the service that the hospital provides may get better in some areas. So if another prop map was run in the future based on actual use, that blue that's being provided by the hospital actually may get a little bit better because it's not working by people in the green, so to speak. So the living and breathing of these things and how they might change a year from now, maybe Verizon gets another band of frequency to use. You know, the auctions happen every couple of years. The carriers adjust to that, but for the foreseeable, I think this is gonna very, very much provide the downtown area, including the train station, including the Amtrak station, those hubs that I put into the tech memo, and even going further south to the edge of Hudson, going south out of town on the water.
Okay.
I don't know, Rick, if you want to add to that at all.
I think you covered it probably better than I did, to say the truth. Yeah, so I agree with what you said. If you'd like me to elaborate, John, I certainly can try for you.
No, that's okay. Thanks.
I think it would be good if we could open it up to the public, because now we're running out of time, right, Betsy?
Yes, I was just going to suggest that if you all didn't have any more questions, that we open to the public.
Betsy, can I ask one that I think is a quick question?
Absolutely, Steve.
And Mike, this is actually a question for you. In the workshop, the applicant presented that essentially in the coverage zone, there are two feasible locations for the antennas. One was Bliss and one was Providence. I just wanted to confirm, do you agree with that assessment, or are you waiting for additional information at this point before being able to make that determination?
Steve, I would like to see, all this is going to be submitted, this series of coverage maps. I trust this PowerPoint, and what I think was pretty helpful, I hope it was helpful for the board, the differentiation between a target area and a search area. I think that made things a lot clearer. It did for me to some extent, understanding Verizon's approach to this particular site. I really would have to look at it, but being on the roof of 119 Columbia Street and knowing the history of Bliss Tower, with unfortunately not being able to lease on that roof, or just the way it worked out, this is the second tallest structure within the search ring. I do agree with that, but I'll definitely opine on that a little bit further, on how they lit up the green versus the red sites, the viable versus the non-viable.
Yeah, you're still looking at that a little bit more closely.
I will, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think, Allison, you can stop screen sharing. Thank you. And do I have any questions from the public? For anyone? Wow. All right. Sam, are you signaling me? Okay, yes, go ahead. Sam, you're muted. There you go.
Okay, I don't want to bore everybody with rehashing through everything that has been done this evening again, but just wanted to bring up the fact that, in my opinion, the guidelines from the FCC regarding the types of propagation maps that are approved to be submitted to them, that whole issue has been disregarded. I also want to bring up again the fact that fall zone around this building, that has been disregarded. And the fact that this building is within the historic district, 2 historic districts, that seems to have been disregarded. That's all I have to say. This is, it's been a long road of back and forth for almost a year now. And I just wanted to reiterate that I don't think these questions have been answered. So.
Thank you, Sam. So, Kathy or Rick or Charlie or anybody, can you comment on the fall zone concern that Sam has?
I'm not sure what she means by a fall zone.
And
I mean, our antennas are on top of the building.
Yeah.
And we're proposing to enclose them with RF stealth material. So I'm not quite sure.
So I think the concern, Kathy, has been in periods of severe weather. Can these things get blown off a roof?
Well, we do very sound structural analyses, and I've never seen that happen. I've been doing this for 27 years, and I've not seen that happen. So I do not believe that is a true concern. And regarding the historic district, we are not in a historic district, and we've been to SHPO with an approval from SHPO. And I think, Betsy, you folks have taken it to SHPO on your own as well. I know you've spoken with John Bonafide.
Yes, I did.
John Bonafide is happy with this, even without stealth around it. So I think it has been addressed. I think we have looked very closely at both, all of those issues.
Can I ask, Betsy, even though SHPO has addressed it, we're the people that live in this city. SHPO can't tell us how to make a decision, can they? Opinion. But
Laura, I mean, as with all interested agencies, we ask for their opinion because sometimes they shed light on things that we wouldn't realize. In this case, John Bonafide at SHPO reiterated what we had gotten earlier, which was that this is not a conforming building. It's not an historic, it's not, it has, the building itself is not historic. It doesn't, I mean, you can read his letter, it's online, but
No, I read it.
he was pretty clear.
Yeah, but we still have our own opinion. I mean, it does affect an historic district in terms of their views.
So you may have, of course, you have your own opinion, but it is, the SHPO letter is a document that is in the record. And, you know, the planning board is bound by the materials in the record. So if you have a different opinion than Mr. Bonafide expressed, you have to be able to support it in writing with evidence.
Okay. Look, if nobody that hasn't spoken has anything, then I do have something that relates back to a couple of meetings ago that I'd like to ask, but go ahead, Mike.
Thanks. I just wanted to add on to something, one of Sam's points. Regarding the fall zone, it's a good question, and it should not be taken lightly. That term comes into play in this code and in the practice of the industry. Many times you think of a tower, a fall zone, but here we're looking at separate antenna arrays, and we're looking at stealth screening, that fiberglass screening around them. That's what's on the table tonight. In our tech memo, I do have, I think, unique conditions, and one is for a full structural analysis that has to be reviewed. If stealthing is employed, it's not just the anchoring of the antennas themselves, but it's of the stealth material. And there's also 2 periodic submittals that would run with this site if it is approved and built. One is for RF emissions, and one is for structural and maintenance conditions. So I've been listening to the board, I've been listening to the public over the months, and I just wanted to bring that out, that's something that we put in as a recommendation.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, that kind of relates to what I was going to say or ask. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of the manager of the building that had joined us a couple of years.
Tim Lamberto?
Okay, yes. What's his first name?
Tim.
Tim. So I can call him Tim. I think that Sam had asked, you know, what if there's a problem, you know, for whatever reason. It seems as though there's a problem with what's going on top of the building. You know, something's hanging off, or something's, you know, has gone awry a little bit. What would he be doing about that? And he said, well, we have a maintenance crew. And that got me to think, well, you think it, Mike, in one of your documents, you talk about, you know, there's going to be warning signs up there. I mean, there's radiation. I mean, isn't it, if a regular maintenance crew, you know, not a Verizon crew, are they supposed to be near these towers? Are they supposed to be right next to them on top of that roof?
That's a good question. One of my conditions or recommendations under the RF emissions portion of it, Laura, if somebody wants to go up to a rooftop, and there's a lot of rooftop sites in our region, say they went up there to redo the roof, to retar a roof, there's got to be an access plan in place, and the building manager and the on-site person at the building has to know that. You know, they can't just send somebody up to paint the side of a building or a parapet and stand in front of those antennas at the near field. You're not supposed to be doing that.
But he indicated, and he has, I think, what, 9 or 7 buildings where he has these on top of them, that his maintenance crew, you know, do any type of repairs that are needed up there. I assuming they're not touching the Verizon equipment.
Yeah, and there's signage. There's FCC signage. There'll be on the entranceway. In this case, it's one door from the penthouse to get on the roof. And the maintenance, it's incumbent upon the building owner and operator to comply, but this is a Verizon site. And if something is happening with a piece of equipment, Verizon monitors these sites continually, remotely. they're not going to want a problem with their network. They're not going to want any liability of something falling off. In the maintenance plan that I recommend as a condition, they have to be out there. Now, normally they're out there perhaps anywhere from monthly to quarterly as things are working, meaning Verizon people are going out and checking out the site. It's not like they're never there. They have to be there. They have to do periodic visits to the site. But what we always need to ensure is, number one, a building operator or manager, even though in this case the rooftop is not used by the public. I've worked on rooftops where there's box gardens on top of roofs and people are hanging out on the roof. That's not the case here. This is an off-limits controlled access rooftop. But even with that said, there could be maintenance people separate from Verizon that are working on the HVAC or working on the rooftop utilities. Maybe there's a patch needed in the roof. There's plans that are put in place in order to do that right. And there's the appropriate signage and barrier system and the enclosures that are being provided now.
Okay,
That's
no,
correct.
But let me ask a question. Let's just say that that's not adhered to. I mean, let's just say that the building manager says, you know, you need to go up there and fix the, you know, a piece of the building. It doesn't matter to me what it is. It's not a Verizon person. Are they supposed to be in protective gear to go up there?
No,
Even
no,
though there's radiation and from what I read, you know, you're not supposed to get, you know, near those things if you don't know what you're doing?
no, there's no specific PPE or personal protective equipment that's required. Working in the near field of antennas, which I'll define as 1 meter in front. No one's going to get within 1 meter with the stealth enclosure to begin with, but that near field region, and with the signage that's provided, that's all that's required by FCC. So if you're a technician with certain training, if you work for Verizon, if you're changing out antennas, if you're spending time in the near field, if you're a tower climber, that's a totally different story.
Yeah, I'm assuming Verizon people know what to do and what not to do. I'm talking about maintenance people that work in the building.
And there are maintenance procedures in place, and we run we call them RFE reports for occupational, you know, visitors to that rooftop. We run them. In fact, I think we've already run one for this new we're proposing currently. And it is safe. If there is maintenance that needs to be done to the roof, the property owner calls Verizon, and we work with the property owner to make sure that whatever workers are going to be on the roof are going to be safe. That's standard procedure.
Thanks, Kathy. Good question, Laura. Any other questions? Victoria, you looked like you wanted to say something.
I had questions earlier, but I think rather than take up time, I think the information will be provided in the new submission, and if it's not, we'll request it.
Okay. All right. We're coming to the end of our time on this application. Members of the public, last chance. Okay, so Mike, we expect a tech memo from you. Kathy and Allison, we expect this presentation from you. And then Mike will follow up with any lingering questions with me.
Okay.
And we will reconvene next month. I'm sorry, I always forget to do this. I forgot to check the date. Second Tuesday in May.
And I'd just like to thank you guys for allowing us the opportunity to present during a workshop. I think it was very helpful.
I agree. I learned a lot. Thank you, Kathy. And I know you and your team spent a lot of time putting that together, and we appreciate the information.
It's May 11th.
May 11th. Okay, we'll see you back here May 11th at 6 o'clock.
And the public hearing is continuing until May 11th. At 6
That's
p.m.
correct. That's correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, moving, Charlie, did I just see your face? You're here. Hello. Okay, so we're moving on to our second public hearing. This is 65 to 75 North 7th Street and 708 State Street. Site plan application from Galvin Initiatives Foundation for a mixed-use building on the North 7th Street lot and a mixed-use building on the State Street lot. Collectively, we're calling this the project. So before we get started, I would like you all to meet Lindsay. Lindsay, where are you? There you are. Who is with Alta Design. Lindsay is going to be consulting on this project largely with traffic impacts. And so Lindsay, welcome. Thank you so much. Charlie, I know that Lindsay has received everything. Lindsay, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at all of it, but she is getting up to speed and I'm really delighted that she could be here tonight. So thank you, Lindsay, very much. We're really happy to be working with you. So Charlie, Dan, I'm not sure who wants to take the lead here tonight.
Sure, I'll get us kicked off. Lindsay, welcome to the fun. So we are a continued public hearing this evening, I believe. We did submit a package to the board dated April 8th or April 7th, I believe. So in that package, just so everyone knows, we did provide what we think is a comprehensive response to all oral and written public comments that we received. We didn't respond to the many comments that we had in support of the project, but I just want to take a moment and thank everyone who participated in the last public hearing, because it's been a long time since I've been involved in a project with that much public support. So it was really refreshing and encouraging to see. And in addition, our recent submission includes an updated site plan and new environmental assessment form to include the 602 Washington Street parcel, which is currently a auto repair and somewhat of an abandoned vehicle storage yard that Galvin proposes to clean up and provide some, I believe, 40 off-street parking spaces. So without further ado, I think I'll hand it over to Chad to talk about the revised site plan and the improvements that are going to be made to that parcel, because no other changes have occurred since last time. And the reason why we submitted the new environmental assessment form was because, as we've always said in the past, all the projects, all the improvements will be reviewed under SECRA. So that new environmental assessment form should assess all the potential impacts. So Chad, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Charlie. I think the best way to proceed is to share a screen showing the modification to the site plan with the additional parking area outlined. And I'm just flipping through those pieces. There we go. Screen two. Can everyone see the revised site plan?
We can, Chad. Yes, thanks.
Okay. So this is currently the property at 602 Washington Street with the auto repair facility. We're proposing an additional 40 spaces of parking can be developed in this area. Okay. We have good flow, good traffic. There's a minor modification to the entrance there that allows for that development, but a very, very clean and easy parcel. It's currently gravel throughout most of it, and there's kind of abandoned car storage there. So for that to clean up, it would be a tremendous benefit. And with the existing surface, it's a minor change to the permeability of the area as well.
So Chad, speaking of permeability and also lighting, are you going to asphalt that lot? Are you proposing to do that? And what's the lighting plan there?
So the city of Hudson code requires dust-free surfaces. There's a couple ways to get there, but we fully intend to meet that requirement. I don't believe we plan to fully pave at this point. Just trying to find the update on the lighting plan as I scroll through. So there's our existing condition area.
So that's just mostly vacant land right now?
That's correct. And there are, like I said, there's old cars and junk cars parked all throughout that area. We have a plan, and I'm looking at it in front of me, but I don't see the landscape lighting plan. There's the lighting plan. I'm sorry. So the lighting plan locates the same fixtures, same downcast fixtures that we have in the parking area over at the 7th Street facility. And we've just shown our minimum safety lighting to provide for safe access in and out of the parking area.
And I know, I think it's Exhibit B to our submission. I provided an aerial image of what the site looks like now. So you can really hopefully try to visualize what a drastic improvement it's going to be from the existing kind of car storage scrap area.
What's happening with the garage that's a part of this property?
We haven't proposed to remove that at this point. Where the overall plan is to repurpose that. We just don't have a final use developed for that. But
whatever it is probably going to need parking, right?
So there's no plans right now for that whatsoever. What will happen is obviously it will get cleaned up immensely, and certainly at a time whenever it is developed, if it is developed, like I said, there are zero plans for that. They would have to meet the parking requirements that this board deems necessary. And through your review of this project, these spaces would be utilized for the project, and then whatever goes there in the future would have to meet your parking demands however you see fit.
Can you just go back to that drawing for a second? Oh, that's good to see that though. So picture left, you've got a row of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or so. Can that be extended to add some more spots?
We looked at a couple different schemes here, and this really, by the time we try to extend through there, we lose our turning radiuses and accessibility. So we think we've got kind of an optimum use in that space.
Okay.
And I'm assuming, Chad, you tried to minimize the amount of impervious surface there while maximizing the parking.
Right, to get a balance between area versus car count, basically.
Okay.
Okay. Chad, any other modifications you want to bring to our attention?
Those were the changes developed through the site plan submission from our side.
So I did have a question because I believe, I've forgotten the name of it. You can see in the photograph that you just showed,
sure,
the parking lot that's behind. Is it a county?
That I believe is actually this parcel to the bottom of your screen. I believe that's owned by the city.
Actually, I'm talking about the upper right-hand corner of the screen. It's just starting to show up.
That's the Oakdale Lake
Oh,
parking.
that's Oakdale. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, got it. Okay. Oh, yes, now I see.
And then the county DSS parking is there to the south,
County DSS, that's
which
what I was
we
looking for.
asked if we could use some of that for our tenants, but unfortunately it's not workable for them.
Okay.
I think Victoria had a question, Betsy.
Oh, sure, Victoria.
So I did have to take a quick break, so if I missed it, I'm sorry, but won't you be required to provide ADA spaces on this plan, which will reduce the number of parking spaces because of the building and having to provide ADA spaces for that use?
We would intend to keep the required number of ADA spaces at the original parking area, which is shown in this area here, Victoria.
Oh, I get that for the project, but I'm asking that by retaining a building on 602 Washington, I guess we should check with Craig as to whether there will be an ADA requirement in connection with that building.
We don't, obviously, if we developed a use that would require it, we would need to develop that. But right now, the use and occupancy of this is very up in the air.
Okay.
So I know the question, Victoria, is it, does the existing structure, albeit that it will not have a use, require ADA parking?
Yes, that's my question. Thank you.
Off the top of my head, I think it's got to be no, that it doesn't. But I will certainly look into it and I can follow up.
Thank you.
Chad, so for the 40 car parking space, I mean, I don't know who would want to park there. Well, maybe a lot of people would. What is there anything that you're going to do to assure that only residents of the apartment building park there? I mean, you know, is that well, actually, is that for residents as opposed to staff of the building? And also, how do you keep the public from parking there and taking up, you know, what's really, you know, not enough parking spaces?
It would be posted as a private parking facility.
And it's for the residents as opposed to staff, or is this also for people that, you know, want to go to one of the stores that's there, or is this just people that live there?
It's for the residents, and it will be posted accordingly.
It's for only residents and not staff or shoppers. Okay, thank you.
So Chad, you said that it's not clear yet if this is going to be an asphalt parking lot or gravel, so that would come in a subsequent site plan, I guess, once you've made that determination.
You know, the city code requires a dust-free surface. There's been a couple different ways we've approached that in the past, and we just haven't gotten to that point in our design development for that.
Okay, so I mean, questions around like stormwater and things like that, we should think about that down the road when we have a.
We will be incorporating the surface as part of our overall SWIP for the project. And we have a couple preliminary concepts for addressing that. The fact that the majority of the parcel is already gravel, which is considered an impervious surface by the DEC, there's not a substantial increase in impervious surface.
Got it. And now, have you all thought about any incorporating any kind of green power sources in terms of you know, solar that could power the lighting, and in terms of you know, like charging stations for electric vehicles? Have you all started to think about incorporating those elements into the parking lot?
We haven't at this point. We were just focused on what type of space could we create, how many spots can we get, how to optimize this opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, no, I would just be interested in thinking about that as we look at later,
Sure.
more evolved plans. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, other questions?
would just like to also highlight, Chad, I don't know what the exact distance is, but as the crow flies from the site, I think it's between like 300 and 325 feet from the project site. So it's well within walking distance for residents.
Okay. Are there other questions, pending questions? Lindsay, you had a question?
I did, thank you. So we had just, I think, Dan, you just noted the walk. I would just want to make sure that we're actually accommodating pedestrians through that walk. I know that there's a sidewalk on the other side of the street, but have you thought through that crosswalk or the connection to that sidewalk so we make sure we have a safe route for pedestrians that are walking to and from the building?
We have looked at that just very preliminarily, but we haven't gotten that fully resolved at that point.
But that is 100% on our radar. The last time we had a group call, we brought that up. So we'll be sure to show that connection.
Thank you.
A question just came to me. It's across, this is John, across the street from the fire station. Will there be safety measures in place to make sure that there's no accidents of any kind?
We have copied the fire department on this submission.
Okay, all right.
But I think, it might be worthwhile to reach out to them and proactively see what they might want, because to Lindsay's point as well, they might want the location of any crosswalk to not interfere with whatever operations they have.
Yeah, that was my thought.
Yeah, we'll coordinate with the fire department as we put together more detail on potential crosswalk locations.
Yeah, you've done that before on stuff. So,
Michael Hoffman, you have a question? Michael, you're going to have to unmute. There you go.
No, sorry, that was an accident.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, Dan, Chad, Charlie, are there any other updates to the site plan that you'd like to review with us tonight?
I don't think there's anything else.
Well, this was the only change.
Okay. All right, so I feel like you all still have a few things that you need to flesh out for us, because we're still looking at some rather preliminary planning, particularly in terms of stormwater and traffic and people moving from place to place.
So just along those lines, as Chad prepares kind of that next step of more formal documents, the location of the building, the size of the parking area, and so forth, it appears as though the planning board is preliminarily comfortable with the design to allow Chad to start making the calculations he needs as far as building location. And Chad, stop me if I'm
You may want to wait. Sorry for cutting in. The board has just retained a consultant, an engineering consultant, to assist with review of the application. Chairwoman, it's up to you, but might it make sense to see what preliminary comments we get from the consultant before the applicant gets to the next level of review?
That's perfectly appropriate, I think. Lindsay, you've got the materials. How long do you think it will take you and your team to look at those and give us a memo on your thoughts and recommendations and questions?
I've already done a preliminary review of at least 90% of the materials that have been sent over, and hope to have at least an initial comment letter within the next couple weeks.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I didn't know that, sorry, that Chad was going to say that. I still would like to know how we can accommodate more parking, more off-street parking. And I didn't know, so I personally am not satisfied with with the parking issue yet, though I appreciate the 40 spots here.
We do have to save some area for the stormwater retention development. So we've kind of just left ourselves some areas for that design development.
Right, but there was, I think we had talked about, renting some spaces from the city in the public parking area, public parking lots. See where your hand is. So that's what I was saying. Can you extend it? Can you extend that? But now what you're saying is you're doing the stormwater thing there. So yeah. But I think that we still need to find some more off-street parking. Obviously not in that area where the 40 spots are from point of view. And I think there might be some board members that agree with that.
We certainly, we'll take that into consideration. We'll look forward to what Lindsay says as she reviews the traffic and parking study. We are trying to thread the needle here of making sure we provide a sufficient amount of parking, make sure we're not creating unnecessary impervious surfaces and parking areas in a downtown urban environment. So we will do what we can to maximize that and to try to thread the needle. And we'll look forward to Lindsay's review kind of on that topic as well.
And I have to say that I don't know what thread the needle means.
Well, it's because there are no off-street parking requirements. So by thread the needle, I mean, what is the
secret process? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
No, I think perhaps to help clarify, I think one of the intentions of our proposal is to produce housing that is in accordance with smart growth principles, with green design principles, and to strike that balance of preserving green space where we can, but also providing the right amount of parking. Not too much parking where our buildings are surrounded only by asphalt, and not, too little parking where there's a burden on neighborhood residents. So I think I just want to say I really appreciate the planning board's proactive step to bring on Lindsay to help provide some additional clarity and an
Just
additional
know that this board member is looking for some more off-street parking. And if that's threading the needle, or not threading the needle, it doesn't matter. I believe that the community is going to be asking for more off-street parking. So and we were, this is not the first time this is being mentioned. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions from the board or the public?
Betsy, I wanted to chime in for a second.
Sure, Mark.
And I realize we're looking at the site plan now, and it's all very helpful, parking, et cetera. But I know, in the last meeting, there were definitely folks who spoke out in favor of the project. There also were some folks who spoke out some concerns, which I share, of lack of a better word, Galvin's performance in the city of Hudson. And I have very strong concerns about a few things, which we can discuss at the appropriate time. Maybe now is not it, but I'll bring them up just in general, which is, to be blunt, given Galvin's track record in Hudson, whether this project can be delivered, given multiple projects they have throughout the city, which have languished for years and years and years. I get it. This is meeting a need. It's meeting a very important need. Hudson has a housing crisis, both for market rate and workforce housing and affordable housing. But some of the speakers last time pointed out that Galvin may be the biggest contributor to that problem. And I don't want to overstep our bounds here relative to what we're doing, but I do think that if Galvin is approaching this board to solve a problem, which is a housing problem, there's, in addition to this, perhaps, there are other ways to solve it relative to their inventory of properties. And I feel like it's a chance now for a public body, us, to hold their feet to the fire on what is happening with Galvin's other inventory of properties. Again, if the goal here is to provide market rate and affordable housing to the city of Hudson, it's my understanding that's their goal. it's my understanding that in my recollection, strong recollections, there were strong voices last month discussing this project as solving that problem or attempting to solve that problem as quickly as possible. I think there's a case to be made. There's other ways to solve that problem, or at least address that problem quickly or more quickly by dealing with Galvin's current inventory of properties. And it's quite frankly the kind of the gorilla in the room here. And again,
Mr. Weeman, I'm sorry, I just have to cut you off for a moment. I just want to remind the board members that, you know, your comments are noted, and I think there's other places for you to air those concerns about this particular developer. But when a project comes before the planning board, this board is concerned not with the applicant, but with the project on paper and its impacts. So I just want to make sure that we're separating the project as proposed, it could be by anyone, from the developer and other properties that he owns in the city.
There were comments last meeting I'm following up on, Victoria, and there was concerns by those folks, which I feel are appropriate for us to discuss. I also feel that you know, there's broad concern in the city of Hudson. And again, if there's a moment now for us to review what those concerns are and to carry, you know, to make sure that those are aired, I strongly feel that this is a appropriate venue to bring those up.
So, I mean, the public is welcome to say what they want to say, but I just want to remind the board members that your role is to review the project as proposed and not look at outside actions of this particular developer.
And the only
To the extent that they don't relate to this, you know, piece of land or two pieces of land.
Thank you, Victoria, for that. The only comment I would make, and Dan, please feel to elaborate when I'm done, is exactly what Victoria says, that we have an application before this board for mixed income housing, and it's designed to solve a mixed income and affordable housing and a general housing problem in the city of Hudson. So the project is being proposed and will be delivered with approval from this board, and will provide housing. So it would be hard to say that a project that is going to be providing housing is not a step in the right direction to combat the crisis that the city currently faces. That being said, we did address many of the public's comments in our written responses. So you're happy to refer to those. They're Exhibit A of our submission. And to the extent we can clarify things, we will. However, we would like to keep things focused to the current application. But Dan, feel free to.
Yeah, and I'm happy to elaborate on the work that we continue to do as it relates to housing affordability in the city of Hudson. So we've completed construction on 39 buildings in Hudson. We've created and preserved 225 units of housing. Among those units, 95% of them are low and moderate income housing. And we're the only organization that's developed any affordable rental housing over the last decade in the city of Hudson. But in addition to that, we've been involved in Hudson in housing related issues in Hudson in a number of ways. And this project is a continuation of that. As we noted in our written response, we also provided $750,000 of grant funding to rescue the low-income housing developing organization of Hudson. That preserved 143 units of senior and affordable housing. It also preserved a foreclosure prevention program, which we operate to this day with state funding. That prevents 15 foreclosures per year. Which is significant. We also operate a home improvement program, which provides $200,000 of grant funding to low and moderate income homeowners to fix things like a broken boiler or a roof or a mold condition. So it's repairs that keep people in their homes. And we continue to operate that with support from New York State. We also developed Galvin Civic Motel, which is the only emergency housing option in Columbia County that provides supportive and safe emergency housing before Galvin Civic Motel. And this was donated strictly with our resources. We didn't receive any public financing for that project. Before Galvin Civic Motel, the county placed people in these terrible, dirty, disgusting motel rooms where they had no security, no supportive services or anything. So we think all of those accomplishments since 2012 is significant, particularly compared to, what else has happened in that realm, which is very little. Now, I understand there's an interest to see some of our other properties come online. We have approximately 33 units worth of housing across buildings that we're continuing to rehabilitate in the city. So we're continuing that work. Whether we are able to move forward with the Depot District or not, we're going to continue to year by year bring on those buildings, just as we have been. I mean, since 2018, we completed construction on 9 residential buildings, creating 24 units of housing. So I think we're making progress, and we're proud of our record on housing. And as Charlie said, this project meets a need, and this is in addition to the other work that we're doing, and has no impact on whether or not we're going to continue, moving ahead with our other many housing initiatives.
I want to just interject. It'd be great to get a view with data of Galvin's inventory of other properties, other projects you just mentioned. That would be great to have that. I want to say something as well, which I brought up with other people in town, including some senior leaders in the city of Hudson. I've been in Hudson not a super long time, 8 years, and have observed. I've worked in construction for a long time and done big projects. I don't need to bore you with my own history, except that I understand how big projects are handled, more or less, because I've worked on some. And I have very strong concerns, and this is related to a specific project, very strong concerns about Galvin's abilities to manage a successful large project like this, given the long track record of, I would say, for lack of a better term, mismanagement of many properties. And I don't think I'm alone in this concern. Throughout this community, there's broad concern. And I understand the complexity of big projects, and I would want to express in the strongest terms possible that I worry about your ability, given that track record, of pulling off a big project like this, again, based on clear evidence that large projects or even small projects can languish for years and get bogged down. And you yourself, Dan, have talked about juggling resources between projects. I'll refer you to a letter from Crystal Hines, local, very respected lawyer in town, who's bringing up these issues as well, relative to Galvin owning property and Galvin's performance on dealing with property, your current inventory. So again, I'm not alone, and I think it's an important issue relative to this project. Your ability to deliver this project is important, and I think if you really want to demonstrate to this board and the community your efforts in dealing with your other inventory, I think it's important for us to see that, and I would like to see the data on that.
So if your comment is noted, and if I just may be a lawyer for a second, I would like to strongly remind the board that we have a site plan application before this board for a development project with a coordinated secret review. So I would respectfully request that this board review the site plan elements, the site plan criteria with your attorney, and get an understanding of what is proper to consider during a site plan review. We will do our best to address these concerns. There are some concerns out there and some opinions of people out there that we simply can't alleviate. However, there are certain performances and securities involved during the construction process, bonding requirements during the construction process, funding that will happen after we hopefully get approval from this board that will hopefully allow this board to be comfortable that the project will be successfully built, and hopefully it will be successfully built if we are able to get approval. But I think it's important to focus on the considerations that this board is mandated to review. But at the same time, I completely understand what you're saying, and we will do our best to provide you with the information that we feel appropriate.
Our mandate is protect the health, safety, and welfare of the city of Hudson.
If I could just, Margaret Morris has been waiting patiently to make a comment.
Thank you very much, Betsy. I was not able to join at the beginning of the meeting. I had another meeting. I have a question for the board, and I'm beginning to understand the role of the board, what you do review, what you do not review. And I understand that you are responsible for looking at proposals that are brought before you in writing that you evaluate and make decisions on. One big concern I have about this, and I want to say, whatever my personal opinions are or not regarding this particular developer, no matter what developer it was, I have a concern about a very major project, infrastructure change project, being brought forth by a developer, any developer, unsolicited, instead of the city having a long-term plan and having an approach to, we would like to establish housing in this area or that area. We want to go out and look to developers and say, what can you bring to the table for us to accomplish what we need? It seems to me that in this particular instance, for something as major as this, and this really is a major deal, entity is driving what should be city planning and what the planning board should be all about. We as a city should have a plan. We should say, we need to do development here, or we want housing over there, whatever, and then go out and solicit bids, proposals, and so forth from developers. I am very concerned that the tail is wagging the dog here. And I don't know, I'm only beginning to understand how the board functions and what your role is. But I would hope that in terms of planning, that the idea of long-term planning is part of what you look at, and whether or not this fits in, excuse me, to a long-term plan for Hudson. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Margaret.
Ms. Morris, just to address a concern that you raised, whether you consider it outdated or not, that's what the city zoning is supposed to function as. At one point, the city elders got together and adopted a zoning law, which said you can build here at this height and you can't build here. And so projects come in based on the applicable zoning in the district, and they have to show that they meet it. Whether that plan needs to be updated is another story, but that's how these projects do come to the board. There is a zoning code, and in order to get before this board, the project has to show that it meets that zoning code, or receive variances from anything that it does not meet.
And I would also like to add that the city has done a tremendous job in telling developers what type of development and what type of housing they want. It's in all of the city's plans. It's in the city's vision statement. And we've demonstrated that this project is very compliant and in furtherance of the city's planning goals. So to Ms. Morris's comments, the city has done exactly that. They have told developers what type of development they want. Galvin has responded, and Galvin has made a proposal consistent with the city's vision statement.
But are you saying an RFP went out?
No, there was no RFP because this is privately owned property.
Right,
An
so
RFP would have been if development was proposed on public. There's a comprehensive plan and a vision statement that was done, I believe, back in 2018, and it said, this is the type of housing we need. These are the locations. This is what the city envisions for the future. Galvin responded to those city documents when it designed this project. And we included all that information in a few different narratives, but we'd be happy to highlight it again.
Charlie's referring to the Strategic Housing Action Plan that was adopted.
Yes, I was just going to correct that myself, which is something that I suggest everyone on this board read if you haven't.
Right. Also, the comprehensive plan is 20 years old or nearly 20 years old. And I know it's on Hudson to update that, but it's not a contemporary up-to-date document.
But it's the one we've got.
I was just wondering what they were, it was mentioned that they were responding to, and I just did not know what they were responding, what document they were responding to.
It's the Strategic Housing Action Plan, the
No,
SHAP.
I know. Okay.
It's on the city website.
Yeah. Hillary, did you have your hand up?
Yes, yes, thank you. I do. I wanted to go back and talk about the parking lot for a moment. I have, regarding another parking lot, I sent a letter to the planning board, another proposed parking lot, and the representing the Conservation Advisory Council for the city of Hudson. I would say many of the same things that I'd written in that letter apply to questions about this parking lot that's being proposed. And I would like you to think about planning for the future, planning for more violent storms. I know that Chad is a great engineer, and you did a good job squeezing in 40 spaces. And I think that even, especially, it is, as you said, currently considered an impervious surface because it is graveled, for decades. And, but I would like to know if either putting in permeable pavers could be considered, and or also digging down and creating bioswales in areas so that water can both support some greenery, but not just greenery, trees. I'll get back to trees in a moment, because to actually use the water that would be coming down. And about the trees, if there was a way to put down through the center a row of trees, and dig down, put in structural soil, put in trees that will start to create some shade, because automobiles create a heat island effect, and it's already a heat island out there, but it's going to continue to get worse, and global warming is going to continue to get worse. So I would like to see that be considered, and also maybe trees around the perimeter. That could really help to reduce the heat island effect. And the other thing was, I do think that as long as you're putting in lighting, as long as you're putting in all of the work, I would go right now and go ahead and put in some charging stations, because e-vehicles are the way things are going. That's all, and they're getting less and less expensive. I just think it would be short-sighted to not consider doing that right now, while, and also, you did mention, I can't remember who it was who mentioned, I don't think it was Chad, I think it was one of the other two gentlemen, said that you want to be using green materials and green thinking in your structures. I think you can start right at this parking lot. It's going to cost a little more, but it's about Hudson's future. It's about the future of all of the children that are going to be growing up in this housing. And I'm hoping that, especially for Laura's concern, that there's not going to be any loss of parking spaces. It might mean some get lost. I don't know. If Chad's a good an engineer, I think that he could probably squeeze this in and keep 40 spots.
That's a great idea, Hillary. The charging stations, there might be grants for that, right?
There, I think that there might be, and there also, I've been looking at grant resources also for permeable paving and things like that. I'm not sure if Galvin because I don't know all the criteria. So I'm just starting this kind of research. The Conservation Advisory Council is trying to put together a package, a paper on this position, which would have lots of resources included. I'm sorry, we're not further along on it. But I know that there are resources out there, and possibly more resources will become available with an infrastructure plan that the president's trying to get through.
Thank you, Hillary. We're coming to the end of our time here. Does anyone else have any burning questions before we move on to our next applicant? Lindsay, did you have anything?
I did have one because I didn't see it on the site plan, talking about parking, and we'll say alternative parking. What are your thoughts? Are you planning on including bicycle parking, either exterior or ideally interior to the building for residents?
Both buildings have interior bike storage.
Do you have a number you can send me?
Let me see if we have that level of detail. It may just be blocked out on a square footage basis, but
square footage is fine. I can work with that.
All right. We'll get you the square footage amounts to start.
Thank you. I that's good to hear.
And the other thing that I think that either I or others have brought up, but we don't have to get it to today, but I think a concern is for the community will be, the construction schedule and, how traffic and pedestrian traffic works during that period. And then I have a question. I think this would be a Victoria question, or anybody else that can answer it. If let's just say that the project, we're given a timetable that that it's a year and a half to come to completion. Is that reasonable, Dan, or anybody to estimate right now a year and a half? It doesn't matter. So let's just say that it's a year and a half. Is there a way that, and this is not, I'm not trying to insult anybody. I'm just asking, is there a way that an applicant doing such a big project like this could be compelled to keep to that time frame so that, the circumstance of a disrupted neighborhood isn't prolonged?
That's a good question. So in general, once an applicant starts a project, they vest and they have the right to continue that project to completion. But through seeker, if the concern is not finishing the project, but mitigating impacts on the public during construction, I'm sure we can come up with some kind of schedule or mitigation techniques that will need to be maintained throughout the entirety of the construction period to mitigate those effects.
I'm going to weigh in on this as well, given some construction experience I have. I mean, I know and I appreciate some of the replies on completion bonds or construction bonds. My experience in New York City, large projects, there's a completion bond that the developer carries, which is essentially insurance that the project gets finished. And not to beat the dead horse here too much, but I have my strong concerns, and this relates to the hopefully the safety and welfare of the city of Hudson and the neighborhood, that this project starts and for some reason, based on my concerns of project management expertise, etc., it stalls and perhaps fails. I don't mean to exaggerate here, but there's plenty of examples in the city of Hudson where this has happened with this applicant. And I feel like they should clearly demonstrate to this board that A, they have a team that can build it, B, that we're committed to finishing it in a timely manner, and C, there's a completion bond in place that ensures that it gets done.
So I understand the comments. We will address them, of course. I will highlight that in our March submission, I believe, we did highlight a construction schedule that came from Baxter, as well as a construction phasing plan. And in that cover letter, we also suggested mitigation measures that could be incorporated into any secret determination that we would happily abide by, including having a hotline for construction impacts for residents to call. But we have most of that information in the record, and we are sticking by what we said, and we will absolutely incorporate all that. Construction scheduling, I would imagine, is difficult because things pop up here and there, but it is always in the developer's best interest to complete it as efficiently and as smooth as possible without any issues. But to the extent we can brainstorm more ways to mitigate construction impacts, we will brainstorm.
Yeah, I mean, and this is not I adore Clark, and I agree with him on many things, and I don't disagree with you on this, Clark, but I do want to say to Charles and the Galvan people that my question about this has nothing to do with who the applicant is, but rather that this is a very large project that's going to disrupt this neighborhood. So that truly is the intention of my question.
Okay, so we're going to take one last question. There's someone on the iPhone that's been, I'm sorry, I don't know who you are. If you could introduce yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you, Betsy. My name's Dominic Moranti. I apologize, I came a little late regarding the parking. So my understanding that there is at least going to be 10 to 12 units for ADA, in this, and also, with the business spaces. How is that going to accommodate ADA parking on site? I mean, I don't think it would be appropriate that ADA parking is going to be in one of the 40 spots that far away from somebody who's living in the residence. So I'm wondering what's the accommodations for on-site handicap parking?
Hi, Dominic. To that question, all of our on-site parking, the 6 spaces are all ADA. So all of the on-site parking, we've reserved that for ADA purposes, and all the spots in the other lot are the non-ADA spaces. And I think also in front of 75 North 7th, we'd certainly be supportive of having some of those spaces striped for ADA purposes if possible.
So it'd be on-site, not streets parking. It would be on-site.
Well, we've got the 6 on-site. Oh, perfect. Yeah, as you can see on the. Oh, sorry, you're on an iPhone, but we're circling on the on-site parking with the 6 ADA spaces.
Okay. Now, would they be assigned to individuals that are in those dwellings, or it would just be anyone, coming to the shop or anything?
I think it would be anyone coming to the shop. Those won't be assigned spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Could they be though, Dan? I mean,
I think they could. Yeah, I think they could be.
I'm not making a suggestion. I'm just wondering if legally they can be, just in case that's an issue. Okay.
Okay, so we need to close this session with the understanding that we'll continue this public hearing at our May 11th meeting. So Lindsay, we look forward to getting your report, and I will share it with the board and with Charlie and the Galvan team as soon as you get it to me. And obviously we encourage public comment. If anyone has emails they want to share, my email address is on the city website. I just got an email from Ms. Morris today, which I've sent to the board. I will have that posted on the city website tomorrow. So anything that we get, we'll be posting in the meantime. So keep checking. So thank you, Galvan folks, for joining us tonight. I appreciate it, and
thank you all.
Appreciate your time. And we will see you in May.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. All right, Tim Mood and Mike Hockman, welcome back. So our third public hearing tonight is for 30 Prospect Avenue, a special exception use application to demolish the existing administrative services building at CMH and construct a parking lot on the site. Craig noted that this is an R1 zoning district. I wanted to remind you all of that. And I also wanted to let the board know that information has been submitted to Rob Perry by the applicant for comment. I have not heard back from Rob this month. I'm not sure if you all have, but anyway, I will let Mike and Tim take it from here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us on tonight. Along with me is Mike Hockman, Director of Facilities at Columbia Memorial. Together, we're going to basically present on the project. Normally, we pick up and take off running from where we left off, but in this case, I thought maybe it would be wise to take a step back and have Mike Hockman basically give an overview of a master plan of the hospital facility as a whole. I know we're all focused on the ASB building across the street, but the intent would be to try to help explain how that site, even though across the street is part of the main campus master plan. Another comment we addressed was parking. We did a parking analysis relative to on-site parking as well as on-street parking in front of the hospital compared to the employee count. And then when Mike's done with his discussions on those two topics, I'll pick up on how we address some of the written comments, both from Rob Perry and the Conservation Advisory Committee. We've advanced our renderings, and I'll take a quick tour through the site plan as it currently stands and submitted on the second submission. So with that, if it's okay if I could share my screen.
Sure.
And we'll have Mike do an overview of the site master plan.
So for those of you who are able to see the presentation, what Tim has displayed right now is an overview of the Hudson campus. Centered on that to the eastern side is the hospital itself, the building that most of us are familiar with. Attached directly to it is the medical office building. Right behind the medical office building is the parking garage. That structure was added at the time of the construction of the medical office building. To the west of the medical office building is the Cavell House, currently occupied by New York Oncology Hematology. And to the west of that structure is the Support Services Building. That is the former location of COARC. The starting place is still located in a portion of that building, but the majority of that space has been renovated and now is occupied with Columbia Memorial staff. To the south on this drawing is the Administrative Services Building. That's the one that we've been discussing. At this time, we're in about 30% capacity for that building. The remaining 30%, the employees that we do have within that building, we have found other locations for as we've gone through long-term strategic planning and really overview for master planning for the campus. We've found locations for where we can offload those staff so that we can fully vacate the building. As you look at this overall map, you can see some of the parking locations that we have directly attached. You have the upper parking lot associated with the medical office building. You have the parking in front of the hospital, which is associated with patients. There's parking to the rear of the building, which is closer to where the emergency room is currently located. There's parking in the parking structure. There's parking behind the Cavell building, and then there are the parking spots that are adjacent to the Support Services building. In addition, we have considered the spots that run on the same side of the street as the hospital. We did take those into consideration when we were doing this. What is not seen and which lays to the north of this map is the 848 Education building that we have. It's directly across the street from us on Columbia Street. That has an additional parking lot attached to it. And what is farther from that is the Green Street parking lot, which we hold a lease from First Reformed Church right on Green Street. We hold a lease to utilize those spaces Monday through Friday when we have the highest level of impact, or I should say when we have the highest level of need for parking at the campus. When we have all patient services and we have the majority of our staff on site, we have that additional parking to kind of relieve some of the congestion that we were finding in and around the hospital. So as we start to really consider the strategic plan of the organization, where we see ourselves going in the next 5, 10, 15 years, how we really maximize the space that we have. As you can see from this drawing, we're landlocked. So it's very important for us to really utilize all the space that we have in the best possible way. We believe because of the age and condition of the Administrative Services building, the lack of ability to renovate that space to get any sort of meaningful medical treatment within that location, that at this time it makes sense for us to decant the last of the staff that we have inside of that building to the other locations that we've identified, and then to remove that structure from the site so that we can add additional parking. So of all the parking that we just discussed and what we quickly showed you, that totals 413 parking spots. The hospital, or I'm sorry, it's 468 parking spots, and the hospital has 560 employees. So you can see in the net, we're close to 92 parking spots short of being able to meet the needs of the staff that we have on site. By removing the structure, adding additional surface level parking, not only do we prepare a location for any potential future growth that we may need, but we also fill a short-term need, which is additional parking for our employees by adding 50 spots. By no means does it fully resolve the issue that some of our neighbors are experiencing with the amount of parking and activity that we have at the hospital, but we feel that this goes a long way in helping to remediate that issue.
Thanks, Mike. Does anyone have any questions about the need?
I have a
Clark.
question. And I know, it is unfortunate Larry's not here. He's very articulate in these matters, but I'll do my best impersonation. You mentioned, sorry, 468 spots for 560 employees. And I guess the question is, it seems to me, or maybe a comment is, it seems to me your basis of your analysis is that every individual deserves a parking spot for a single occupancy car, and it's your job to accommodate a single occupancy car for every member of the staff. Is that correct?
Our contention is that we need to support the needs of our staff. And although not every staff member may be choosing, we do need to view it from the lens that the catchment area that we have to cast our net to get the necessary employees to fulfill all the positions we have does require us reaching through multiple counties, which does increase the number of people who are commuting into a facility.
And I guess my second question, thank you for that answer. Maybe this is a little cynical, but when you run out of space, what next building do you demolish to make space for parking?
I don't think we should view this as us demolishing a building for the sole purpose of creating a parking lot. This is us raising a building that no longer serves a functional need for the facility. And when we start to consider what the future of this organization looks like, it's hard for us to find a purpose that meets any need with this building.
Okay.
I can actually attest to that.
I think I asked this the last time. So, the community in that area has an issue, a problem with you guys have the problem, and the community has a problem of, of hospital employees, parking in the area there. And the administrative people in the hospital, they probably have assigned parking spaces, I would assume. The people that are, on the higher up end of the administration, do they? I mean, what I'd like to know is this parking going to be for the nurses and, the support staff? Who's going to park there? Who gets to have the spaces there? That's one question. And two, is there a way to keep that to be only hospital employee parking, so that the people that are going to see their doctor aren't parking there?
That is correct. We are able to limit access within the structure. Part of the plan that we'll present tonight shows the access control system that will be co-located on this site. That system would be restricted to employees. We have an access control system that we use internal to the facility that we can also replicate on the access control for the gate arms. So we can limit the employees. The intent of this parking lot is for the employees who need to have access to parking, those who are unable to find it in any of the designated locations for the facility. So yes, I mean, those who are in need, the ones who are constantly finding themselves with the need to park on the street, would have the ability to go and secure a spot in this location.
Yeah, I mean, what would be a shame is, for me to drive by there and see that, all those reserve spots with me, when I see a reserve spot, it basically means that probably the people that would have, that are not on the administrative end are not the ones that are getting the parking there. I mean, so if the goal is to get the, for parking for people that are having to park in the neighborhoods and stuff, that would be great. And I'm not saying this well, but you get what I'm saying, right?
No, I believe that
a
you
way
and
to
I are
be
saying the
PC.
same thing, which is the intent of this is to find parking for employees who otherwise are unable to find it on hospital property, not to put signs in the ground so that the CEO has his own designated parking spot. That's not the intention of this parking project.
Mhm. I have a follow-up question too, if I may. Again, just related to parking demand, and I get it that I appreciate your reply that your sort of catchment area for employees is big, and there's many people driving long distance. And it seems to me, I know we brought it up last time. It's a question of, for me, I am in general not in favor of demolishing a building in whatever state it might be to provide additional parking. And if there's some other use for that building, it seems to me that it would be potentially contribute to city to Hudson housing, contribute to some other function. I guess that's just sort of some background of, have you looked at other ways to minimize demand for parking? And, some things that I had sort of researched and considered were vouchers for employees to, or incentives for employees to carpool. If there's space for patients, if I'm a patient there, sometimes I would love to be able to take a cab up there and back and not have to have a space for single occupancy, single person car. So I guess my question is, have you looked at other ways to address the issue of parking demand by mitigating parking demand instead of pursuing building one spot per employee?
Again, I don't want us to look at the intent of this project as being demolishing a building for the sole purpose of building a parking lot. This again falls into the larger plans of the organization. As I mentioned towards the beginning of this presentation, we're on a peninsula. And in healthcare, you need to consistently evolve and grow, and the demands for how space is built and what needs to be incorporated within those spaces to meet the patient needs requires additional space. So we don't anticipate this being a location that sits dormant for 40 years while Hudson goes through a housing crisis. We fully intend on every parcel of land we own to be developed to its maximum potential. I understand your question around what are we doing to reduce our carbon footprint? What are we doing to encourage our employees to carpool or find other ways to arrive at work? And I wish I could speak intelligently to what every manager and supervisor does to really, influence that decision with their employees. But I don't have anything concrete that I can speak to, but I can say that that's a valiant goal for us to set as an organization, and something that I think we can look into to find ways to increase the desire of our staff to find those ways to make it in.
Thanks for replying.
Bicycles.
I also want to just make an obvious statement that, and I appreciate that it's dysfunctional now for you and your current needs, but you are demolishing a building for parking. That's what you're doing. And per your
if I could add, we talked about the state of this building, and being that we're engineers and architects and a consultant retained by the hospital, we've evaluated the systems in this building. And today's standards in the medical care industry, it's extremely cost prohibitive to convert, renovate, upgrade this building to today's standards. It's not feasible in the grand scheme of things. I'll go so far as to say, in these COVID times, and Mike and I talked about this, and I didn't really want to go into this extreme example, but I'm trying to get everyone to understand that in this extreme world that we're living in, you've seen these COVID hospitals pop up in tents. You've seen Central Park turn into a mobile ICU unit. And frankly, by demolishing this building, it actually gives a more realistic temporary ICU or COVID care space as a tent space than it does as the building that stands there today. It's hard to imagine that. But with these negative pressure units and all the standards that healthcare requires, it's just not feasible to convert this building to a use that's going to fit the model of the healthcare industry today. That's truly the reason why the building is coming down.
It's not even appropriate for an office building.
No,
I promise you, it is not even, forget the high standards of a medical facility. It's not appropriate even for an office building.
So the parking lot is secondary really to that. It's not primary.
I appreciate your reply.
Is there anything new from the last time that
Sure.
to
Yeah,
address?
we just wanted to try to touch on these two topics to try to backfill the story. So if any other questions, we can move on to the next. So we updated our renderings. Before I give you that, I just want to remind everybody, the existing building image and the perspective that we're looking at. Again, this is an existing wall along the back, and we're keeping that same theme. This retaining wall is at the base of a pretty significant slope. There's also a grade drop in the front that you can see along this picture. And so our new wall will also be holding back the parking lot. So there'll be a grade drop there. Those are two design elements that we'll get into further in the discussion. But so we've tried to advance our renderings from the same sort of viewpoint. Again, this is an existing wall along the upper side. Again, the back wall is existing and would be repaired and look visual and theme. I got to remind everybody that this is a digital rendering, so it's not 100% accurate or intended to say this is exactly what it's going to look like. And by that, I mean these trees, obviously, along the slope are not representative. We talked about managing the parking access. So here are the gates with the access command where employees would be controlled. We've added concessions and talking with Rob Perry at DPW about having the solar powered crosswalk signs on either side, adding the crosswalk. That would be basically design elements that we've incorporated. Again, the base of this wall is going to be on the inside of the property line, but this green space here, we're calling out for grass right now. It's really within the city right away. We talked about responding to some of the advisory committee comments. The Conservation Advisory Committee, we couldn't respond to all of them, but we're trying to accommodate some of them. And we'll get into that in a second. But all other design elements include like a fake wrought iron fence for safety, pedestrian safety along the top of the retaining wall. And then there's a wooden type guide rail on the inside to protect parking. I've got a couple different angles here to show you some perspectives. Again, this is all existing wall, meant to model the existing heights and again, the textured look along the back. Another perspective, you can see a hint of this green space. So again, taking into consideration some of the Conservation Advisory Committee about adding green space and trying to basically, green up the pavement area to reduce the heat sink nature of it. And I have one more perspective. I guess that's kind of the same. So from there, we could do a quick run through the plans. a lot of this you've seen on the last presentation, but I'll try to focus on the highlights. A big one was, our site project area is less than an acre. Our current site is 100% or nearly 100% impervious between the roof of the building and the surrounding pavement. So by current stormwater standards, we're not obligated to incorporate stormwater detention. However, we've taken in consideration, again, some of the comments on the Conservation Advisory Committee. We worked with Rob Perry and came up with a modest stormwater detention plan. The city has a combined storm and sanitary sewer system. So while there's been discussion of pervious pavements and bioswales, we looked at a couple of these options here. But again, I mentioned the retaining wall on the uphill side holds back a significant slope. And again, we have a retaining wall along the front. So when we have those kinds of scenarios, we don't really want to promote infiltration of stormwater that can saturate subsoil conditions. And it would be our concern that any infiltration along the backside could compromise the integrity and structural integrity of the retaining wall on the backside. And the similar type of scenario could happen on the front side. Whereas if there was significant infiltration of stormwater, it could find its way and bleed out through the front of the wall. So with all that considered and still trying to provide some sort of stormwater detention, again, we've worked with Rob Davis and came up with Rob Perry and came up with a subsurface stormwater detention. Basically, it's like a giant tank, and it'll withhold a 25-year storm or detain a 25-year storm, which is a lot more mitigation than what currently goes on at the site. And then continuing on some of the other comments, again, with the bioswales, we try to offer up some green space. We've sort of modified the alignment of the parking. We've got our landscape architect recommended this called Grow Low. It's a pollinator breed, sort of low growing shrub. And we've added this all along the front perimeter of the parking area. We are including the dark sky friendly light poles. Where's their spec there? And then again, we have the solar powered crosswalk signs to give somewhat of a graphic for the crosswalk. So
Does that answer your issue, Betsy? About the crosswalk? Does that?
It does. I know that Hudson is putting about 60 of these in and around, and they've modeled that. So yes, I'm very pleased with that, actually. That's a great improvement.
So again, we tried to get some graphics of the plantings, but let me go back and see if I could show you where this is going to be. I went too fast. So if you recall our first parking layout, again, we were trying to maximize with 50 spaces. And this alignment was basically perpendicular with the wall, and it was all pavement. So what our designers have done is try to tweak this and turn the whole thing sort of at a slight angle. And that created these wedge spaces along the front. And that's what we're proposing to be now all of the plantings in the green space of the low grow. And then
Where's the entrance? I'm turned around. Where's the entrance?
The entrance is right here.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So you're just basically going to come in and you can make a loop and then go back out. And then again, so this wall here runs along the property line, and this is city property in the front. And right now we're calling that to be grass, because we didn't want to spec necessarily a tree on the city property. But, I don't know that Mike would have to speak up, but I don't know that we're opposed to maybe planting a few trees along this area, but it has to be really acknowledged that that's city property. And generally we work with the municipality to spec that tree. You don't know if there's a specific.
Check that out and ask the city if that's possible. Because that would be nice to have some trees or, something to break up the parking lot and then extend it to the other parking lot too.
Yeah, I think there are already a few kind of scrub trees in front of the other parking lot. But again,
The city would agree if you could get your landscape person there to come up with some design of some, you know, not, I don't mean tall trees, but trees that break up, you know, this kind of bland space and some shorty things. That would be nice. Does the board think that's?
We can have a conversation with Rob Perry to discuss it, but with its close proximity to the road and the amount of salt that's applied during the winter months, it's very difficult to grow anything that close to the road. So we're definitely happy to work with Rob, and if he knows of a variety, whether it be tree, shrub, or otherwise, you know, I think we can definitely try to work something like that into the plan.
That would be really terrific. I mean, you said that you had a landscape architect.
We have a landscape architect on staff that,
They
you
would
know,
know what could withstand the salt or what's okay close to a road, probably also. But it would be nice to have some landscaping up in front of both those parking lots.
so really that was pretty much our highlighted list of taking into consideration the written comments. You know, I didn't know if there were any other questions on what I kind of ran through.
Are there any other questions from the board? And I'm happy to open this up to the public as well for questions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just wanted to say, I mean, I think I was really grateful for the input from the Conservation Advisory Council. And I think that you know, thinking about incorporating some of those green elements, including, you know, trees and the permeable asphalt, was not really just about like having a nice kind of way to sort of break it up aesthetically, but that you know, this is actually a way of being forward thinking about the impacts of climate change. And, you know, Tim, I mean, I heard you say that, you know, this takes into account kind of 25-year storms, but you know, I just feel like what we're experiencing more and more, and what that letter from the CAC highlighted, is that 100-year storms are happening a lot more frequently, maybe every 10 years or something these days. And, you know, I guess I'm not speaking from any engineering expertise, but I would think that there is also risk for that retaining wall, you know, if you have impermeable asphalt, if we're talking about, you know, the impacts of climate change. So I just think that this project, I think, would really benefit from being as forward thinking about those elements as we possibly can be. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that I think the concept around planting went beyond just sort of the aesthetic impact of it, and that there's a real, you know, sort of practical consideration about safety and stormwater.
That's a good point, Steve.
Well, so again, we have to abide by the rules, right? So the 100-year storm is governed by the SWIP rules. This doesn't fall under there. I hear what you're saying about, you know, due diligence and being practical about it. I think the 25-year storm offers some benefit. If there was a deluge, it's not like this whole area would turn into a swimming pool and cascade. If water were to well up, it would still be able to infiltrate through all the green space. So you're still going to get some infiltration, as if it would almost act as a bioswale in an extreme kind of situation. The whole backfill behind the wall is all going to be stone, so it will drain eventually. So, you know, I think inherently there's some features designed in here that will allow for a long-term solution. It's just, you know, for us to size, because of this scenario, again, being behind the wall and not wanting to saturate the wall, you know, normally we like to try to get infiltration to go on, and we can disperse all the stormwater that moves through the system. But we just don't have that ability with this setting, being that there's a wall behind it and a wall in front of it. So I think what we've tried to do here is a reasonable approach. And while we don't have a written response from Rob, you know, I think he was pleased in our discussions with what we presented.
And what about some of the suggestions around charging stations for electric vehicles?
So we talked about that, and we can elaborate on the.
Sorry, Tim, thank you. So the hospital actually has a separate plan that we're working through right now in partnership with National Grid and some local vendors to have the installation of charging stations. We felt that we would get better use out of them if they were located in more premium locations. So we are in the process of developing that plan, and we do expect to move forward with that in the near future.
That's great. That's great.
Other questions? Okay, board, what do you all need from Mike and Tim to move this application along? That you haven't seen yet, or more information, any more information that you might need?
Well, I guess, are we waiting for Rob to, well, I would like to find out what we can do in terms of the greenery, you know, on the street side of both parking lots for the purposes of aesthetics and the purposes that Steve has brought up. I'd like to know more about that. And I guess we have to wait and see what Rob says, right?
Well, Rob has already given the project his thumbs up from.
He's given the stormwater thing.
Yeah. Well, that was my understanding. Is Mike, is that, and Tim,
That
didn't
was
he?
our understanding too, but if you need something written specific from him, I think that would need to come from the board.
So my understanding was that Rob Green lighted this with the improved stormwater retention system that's been planned. So from the city DPW point of view, that was the one outstanding piece that I think has been accomplished.
And this picture here shows the tree line that's there along the existing lot. So, I mean, that's,
Oh, I see.
in my mind, that's what maybe these smaller growth trees is what we would try to replicate. But again, this slope here is within the city right away. So,
Right. Well, if you could, I forgot that there were trees there, which is great because I also forget that there's a parking lot there, and it must be because there's trees there.
And I'm sort of an opinion that because the piece of land in front of the proposed parking lot that we see as green grass right there right on Prospect is city land, I'm not sure in my mind that it's fair to hold up an application to see whether or not they can plant a series of trees there, as much as I would love for them to do it. No, don't mistake me. I think that would be a wonderful thing to ask the city, but I'm not sure that would be a reason to deny an application if Rob wasn't willing to allow trees to be planted there. So just do keep that in mind.
Betsy, may I say something?
Yes, Hillary.
I'm sorry. I don't know where the raise your hand button is here. And so first, I wanted to say something during the public comment period. I really want to thank you very much. This is Hillary Hillman representing the Conservation Advisory Council. Thank you very much for taking to heart and truly considering all of the different aspects that I brought up that you could possibly consider. And I think that your proposal is very respectful. And I think that it does solve a lot of problems. I'm glad that you're going to be working on figuring out electric charging stations for cars in your various parking situation or locations, and that that will be addressed. And also, just so that you know, the Conservation Advisory Council wrote a grant for having a tree inventory study of the entire city. We'll be getting a tree management plan, and then once we have that, the city will be eligible for getting grants for planting trees. So I have the feeling there's a little stretch of land there that could be included a couple of years down the road, where we could be including some trees, because that is quite an expanse of, I guess those are concrete faux stone walls, correct?
yes, they're concrete blocks, generally
Right.
about 2
Right.
feet wide by 3 feet long, right?
Right. And I think that, Rob, just living right down the street, was probably very invested in the stormwater runoff not coming and getting his house.
He was for sure, Hillary.
But I think this really does work out nicely. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what season the rendering is showing with the leaves on and the way the sun's going, but there is shade that comes off of that hill, and that will help. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Hillary. And I think that, I'm glad you're here. And that was really what I was going to ask in terms of, answering that question of whether we need more information. If you feel like, this plan incorporates some of those things that you were looking for in a meaningful way, then, I feel like most of my concerns have been met with this plan too.
Yeah, I put out all of the concepts that I knew, and it really looks like they tried to work with each of them and have a good reason that things won't work. And I certainly respect that you don't want to be planting a tree probably above the wall, and in that green space that you put out because of roots and everything, that if we can do it down on the city strip level, plant a few trees, I think that it's going to help a lot visually, but also with the whole shading thing and keeping heat levels down. So yes, I feel like it's a really great response. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really happy.
Good, Hillary. That makes me feel good too.
I know. Well, we're neighbors. I'm just a couple blocks away. I walk when I go to the hospital, but
So board, what else do you need? Are you prepared to close the public hearing?
Yes, so.
I am, yes.
Steve, you are. John?
Sure.
I don't want to push anybody. I'm just trying to hear from you all.
Wish Larry was here, but yeah. Is Teresa still with us?
Yes.
Okay.
Clark?
Well, it seems like we've heard the public comment, so I'm good with closing the public hearing.
All right. So do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Thank you, John. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Steve. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, so there's phase one of that. Are you all prepared? We do still have a little bit of time. Are you all prepared to do the seeker questions?
Sure.
All right.
But that was in the original. Are you talking to me or the board? Sorry.
I'm talking to the board. All right, I didn't think we were going to get this far today, so I did not have the secret questions open. So give me one moment. Let's see. Sorry for the delay. I'm just looking for part one. You guys sped ahead of me.
I have a quick comment or question, Betsy. It's in a residential zoning district, right?
It's R1. But it's permitted there. I checked with, I double checked with Craig on that one.
Betsy, I have part one if you want me to share my screen, maybe.
Oh, that would be great.
I think, let's see.
It's actually part two that we need, Tim. Do you have that?
Let's keep going, hopefully.
I've got it. I've got part 2.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, board, as we're all very familiar with part 2, I will run through the questions. I can. Okay. Trying to manage all the pieces I have open here. Sorry about that. All right. I will share my screen if I can find it. What are you all seeing now? Anything at all?
No. Betsy, I was gonna say we know it well enough, you can read it off to us.
All right. So the first question is impact on land. The proposed action may involve construction on or physical alteration of the land surface of the proposed site. That's a yes or no. So yes, right? It will. So the sub questions here are the proposed action may involve construction on land where depth of water table is less than 3 feet. I would, are you, no or small impact. The proposed action may involve construction on slopes of 15% or greater. No. The proposed action may involve construction on land where bedrock is exposed or generally within 5 feet of existing ground surface. I don't believe so, Tim.
No.
The proposed action may involve the excavation and removal of more than 1,000 tons of natural material. No, it's probably removing that much of unnatural material. The proposed action may involve construction that continues for more than 1 year or in multiple phases. I would say no. The proposed action may result in increased erosion, whether from physical disturbance or vegetation removal, including from treatment by herbicides. No. The proposed action is or may be located within a coastal erosion hazard area. The answer is no. Any other impacts you all want to put in here for impact on land? All right. Impact on geological features. The proposed action may result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual landforms on the site, such as cliffs, dunes, minerals, fossils, and caves. I think we can answer that as no and not have to do the sub questions. Are we good? Because this just wants us to, okay, then impact on surface water. I have to fill in the little form. No, we don't have any caves. No, we don't do this. No, we don't do that. Impacts on surface water. The proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies such as streams, rivers, ponds, or lakes. No. For impact on groundwater, the proposed action may result in a new or additional use of groundwater or may have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater or an aquifer. I don't believe so. It doesn't require wells. Well, I can run through the sub questions. The proposed action may require new water supply wells or create additional demand on supplies from existing water supply wells. That would be no. Water supply demand from the proposed action may exceed safe and sustainable withdrawal capacity. No. The proposed action may allow or result in residential uses in areas without water and sewer services. No. The proposed action may include or require wastewater discharge to groundwater. No. The proposed action may result in the construction of water supply wells in locations where groundwater is or is suspected to be contaminated. No. The proposed action may require the bulk storage of petroleum or chemical products. No. And the proposed action may involve the commercial application of pesticides within 100 feet of potable drinking water or irrigation sources. No. Impact on flooding. The proposed action may result in development on land subject to flooding. I think we can safely say no, that land is not subject to flooding. Impact on air. The proposed action may include a state regulated air emission source. Don't believe so. Do you all agree with me?
Agreed.
No. Impact on plants and animals. The proposed action may result in a loss of flora or fauna. No. Impact on agricultural resources. No. Impact on aesthetic resources. The land use of the proposed action are obviously different from or are in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. I think we can say there's nothing very aesthetic there. Do we agree? Impact on historic and archaeological resources. I'm pretty sure, Laura, you're the expert on this question. That's got to be a no, right?
No, but Clark thinks it's a yes.
Clark thinks a yes.
I'm just going to comment that, I'll reiterate Larry Bone, who's our resident architect expert here, that, somebody in the future may say, look back on us demolishing this building, which is definitely a modernist building. It may not be typical Hudson historic, but it's sort of, I would say, 60s, 70s modernist building. So does right now, our aesthetic is that it doesn't have any value, but it certainly may at some point. I would say it has value aesthetically. It's a pretty cool building. But for seeker purposes, am I in the wrong here? I don't know. I would say that I have a concern that it's a building that has architectural and aesthetic value.
But the question is impact on historic and archaeological resources. So the proposed action may occur in or adjacent to a historic or archaeological resource.
I'm not sure what a resource is in this case. What other architectural resources are there?
Archaeological resource.
Oh, archaeological. It's not historic resource.
Historic resource or archaeological resource. That it's occurred in or adjacent.
Clark's saying that it is a historic resource.
It's not on the registrar. I think the
Has Shippo looked at it?
Yeah,
it actually doesn't have to be on the register, but just, hey, Clark, I think this probably was built cheaply. I mean, I don't have a problem with this going away. I save pieces of wood. That's how bad I am. And I don't have a problem with this building going away.
I'm not going to raise a stink about the project. I mean, again, I look at it like if I were the owner of that building, I would look for a creative reuse of it because it has historic and architectural value. But obviously the owner doesn't agree with that position. So
the owner, again, you got to consider the owner is a medical facility. So
oh no, I understand that. I totally get it. I get it. I understand. I understand that, but we could think outside what you guys typically do with a cool building and think of some other option. But again, I'm just the lone voice here. So
if I owned it, it would be the last resort.
So carry on, please.
Okay. Number 11 is impact on open space and recreation. The proposed action may result in a loss of recreational opportunities or reduction of an open space resources designated in any adopted municipal open space plan. The answer is no. Impact on critical environmental area. The answer is no. It's not adjacent to a critical environmental area. Impact on transportation. The proposed action may result in a change to existing transportation systems. I don't believe so. Impact on energy. The proposed action may cause an increase in the use of any form of energy. One could argue they're making more parking spaces, but it's not for more cars. It's just giving cars a place to go. So I don't think it's going to increase energy demand. Do you?
Not
taking away the building, that's probably a greater energy use.
I agree. Impact on noise, odor, and light. The proposed action may result in an increase in noise, odors, or outdoor lighting. Well, we do know they're doing dark sky compliant lighting, and that seems to be the only impact. So I would say that's a no. Impact on human health. It's positive. The proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. The answer is no. Consistency with community plans. The proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. It's not in conflict with any of our land use plans that I can imagine. Board?
Think of any.
Know enough about that.
Well, that's the comp plan, the vision plan, zoning code. It's not in conflict with any of those things. And finally, consistency with community character. The proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. Given what's there now.
As long as you're looking
by
across
parking
the hospital.
So you want me to run the sub-questions?
Yes.
The proposed action may replace or eliminate existing facilities, structures, or areas of historic importance to the community. This speaks to you, Clark.
Well, I don't represent the community. I just want a voice here. I'm missing Larry. Is what I'm telling. I guess.